Sorry, light right in my eye.
All good.
I understand.
See, I told you. Let's see if we can adjust you in our ears. All right, cool. So we hit the live button so Facebook doesn't kick us off, but
cool.
So episode 17, I made the Facebook post so everybody would know it was going to be a little different, that it was Teresa and myself, and then we are joined by Scott and Tyese Eipper. And so my non-reptile wife probably has no idea who you guys are. Sorry. Even though I brought up to her how cool it would be to talk to.
It's so refreshing to find someone that doesn't know who the Scott is.
Well, I told her, I was like, yeah,
I want to the door in a minute.
Well, I told her, like, I had seen, on the Facebook post and stuff that you guys do some of the things similar to us, wildlife demonstrations and things like that, but in the other side of the world in a totally different way, and also are published authors and venomous keepers and
we're not that, though.
The whole myriad of reptile stuff that you guys do. And so that's the response I got was,
but I'm not that.
That's not what we do at all. And I was like, yeah, it's the same, but different.
The authorship, and are we actually live now? I'm not sure if
we are. We are actually live.
Okay, fantastic. So I suppose the authorship, in a lot of ways, is like an extension of the wildlife demonstrations, because everything about wildlife demonstrations is all about educating the public, right? And so you use different media to educate different people. If you talk to you look at the way schools design courses and things like that, they're always looking to do something slightly different. So it's really good for certain people to be spoken to. It's really good for other people to learn by visual means. Other people learn by reading. And so the authorship of papers and things like that, which then eventually led to doing books, is just an extension of educating the public about these wonderful creatures we're so enamored by.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, we actually were just discussing that this week. So outside of reptiles, I actually work in federal law enforcement, and I teach a whole myriad of things related to that with combatives and emergency medicine and things like that. And I was just going through a couple of different courses to help teach people. And that was exactly what it was based on, was some of the people I was teaching needed to be able to physically do the things in order to understand what it was that I was saying. And then a few, I just showed them some PowerPoints, read it through, and good to go. So yeah, it was a little more hands-on way of teaching as opposed to how we normally do our reptile demonstrations. But it was, I don't know, just a good representation of it. Well, our reptile demonstrations are hands-on.
I think it was more hands-on than what your medical stuff is normally. Normally it is PowerPoints. What you were teaching was more hands-on.
But I mean, for us with the reptiles, it's always hands-on.
I was going to say, I don't know.
We rarely do the
people to show them a physical demonstration of how to treat a gunshot, though.
We actually buy large
I actually
pieces
took
of meat.
a pork shoulder and shot it, and then made people fix it.
Yeah.
So that was what I did. It made some people a little nervous, but it was all right. And Scott, and I don't know, Ty, if you're familiar, but you'll be happy to know that I'm pretty sure Justin is stalking us on YouTube. So he was more than ready. He was here early to hear you talk.
Beautiful,
so.
beautiful. As long as people are stirring us up as much as I stir them up, I think that's what needs to happen.
I was gonna say, man, I'm kind of surprised you were willing to sit and talk on something where you knew there'd be live comments. As much as you're in the comment section, and I'm always talking back and forth to you, to have people be able to come at you in the comments is pretty funny.
Bring it on. Bring it on. So the difference is, I mean, it doesn't worry me. At the end of the day, I like a robust debate, regardless of how things are across. Because at the end of the day, a good debate means that we all get to learn about things. And I see so many parallels between keeping in the US and keeping in Europe and keeping in Australia. We just have a different set of species, I suppose, that we're working with. But the way that you work with desert terrestrial agamids is very, very similar across the globe in a lot of ways. But I think we always need to be challenging the way that we keep, because if we only ever do what's always been done, we're never going to improve. And so we should always be looking to tweak and looking to do things slightly differently. And I think, you look at Ryan McVeigh's new lighting system that he's bringing out and all the rest of it, and you see there's people that are already poo-pooing it, and they go, oh, but we don't know what the UVC content is, and we don't know what this is, and we don't know what that is. You think that they didn't do the testing before they bring it out? Really?
We actually do know that.
So we, I don't know. I'll tell people on live. I don't care. We're some of the people that test their stuff.
We have not tested this stuff specifically. We're
really good friends with them. Ryan and Erica Erica is the founder of the rescue that Teresa and I are board members on. And when they first started this venture, Bill Stewart, who was a part of Madison Herpsological Society, and ourselves were some of the first people to really know that was happening. And then, right now, Bill and I are testing future products for them. So I promise you, they are actually tested. And they were tested on our animals and multiple other ones.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the thing, right? So people see seeing the end product, and it's like, I'll get my first book plug in. They see this, right, and go, oh, yeah, that's the end of it. What they're not realizing is that book was 2 years in the making.
Right. It
doesn't take 5 minutes. And I think, how many did we have? Was it like 10 species accounts we had to rewrite because bloody taxonomists describe things, and it's like, oh, that's all right. And look, we're okay with that. It's fantastic. But at the same time, all of these things, a lot of people see the end product. It's like, if you're looking at a light in a box, how many hours of testing, how many hours of development has somebody gone into that? It's not, and at the end of the day, you don't want to put out a shitty product, because you put out a shitty product and that's the end of it. It's
your name's on it.
Your name's on it, exactly. Right. It takes years and years and years to gain a reputation in the industry. It takes seconds to lose it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and what gets me, especially nowadays, is, so for like the two of you, I first found out about you guys through reptile social media and podcasts and Facebook and all these things. And then somebody who is not a reptile social media person, I drag them in. But like that's
same.
but that's a simple way to, like, that's ready access. You know what I mean? So if you're looking at a book or you're looking at a subject, I mean, I've was just making a joke earlier, but I was dead serious. Like, I've been in the comment section on a bunch of different live things where you were also there, and I've seen you comment and seen you interact and heard you talking to people. And then you can go on Facebook, you can look at Nature for You, you can see all of those things. And so then when you see that book on the shelf or you see it available or what have you, like, you kind of already have that reference point of not just the subject, but the actual authors and the person that created it. I can just go ask you, and
100%.
I don't know that. I don't know that people, well, you might not want everyone to take advantage of that because it would just flood your inbox, but how, like, people, I don't think people quite understand, like, that's a really big deal. So for you guys, like, you were very easy to talk to, despite the fact that we're on the opposite sides of the planet. I mean, I was actually geeking out with Justin that day that you called me, and I was like, hey, my Facebook Messenger started ringing. I honestly thought you had been in the live chat and then messed up and didn't mean to click it. And so when I answered, I was like, and I told her, I was like, hey, I don't know if he meant to call me or what, but you have that level of access to people in the industry.
We get some weird ass fans, don't you worry.
But in all seriousness, I breathe and do all this stuff that everyone else does. And I'm just as excited about reptiles as everybody else is out there. And
we're no different to the next person, really. I don't know.
I think the only difference with us is that, we're crazy enough that, we instead of sitting there and watching telly and all the rest of it. Don't get me wrong, we watch television as well, but we spend a lot of our time focused on
cleaning, feeding.
Cleaning and feeding, but then also writing and disseminating information. I genuinely really like teaching and giving back to the hobby. Mm-hmm. And this is one way that I can give back to the hobby that's given me so much as a young kid. I was that kid, the 10-year-old kid at the Herpetological Society meetings. My parents, drag my parents along. They'd take me to the herp meetings, and I'd be sitting there in the front row. And I never forget meeting a bloke by the name of Richard Shine. Everyone knows him as Rick Shine. And I met Rick Shine when I was 13 years old, right? And I ran up to, sort of spoke up to him after a herp meeting, and I'm shaking. I've got this herp book that he'd written, and I asked him to sign the book, and I said, I really love epaulets. Now, obviously, that's elapids. And, he turned around and he goes, Scott, I think you mean elapids. But, they're probably not the best thing to be keeping as a young kid, and then signed the book, Best Regards, Rick Shine. Now, Rick probably doesn't remember that, right? But for me, that was so important to not only speak to somebody, it doesn't matter whether they're 5 years old, 50 years old, 100 years old, speak to somebody with respect. And speak to them as your equal. Don't talk down to them. There's no point in talking down to somebody. Nobody likes that. And as soon as you start to talk down to somebody, you then close off your forms of communication, right? And so by closing off a form of communication, you yourself miss out on a huge opportunity as well, because you miss out on that opportunity to learn from those people, right? Everybody has a different perspective on things. Some are right, some are wrong, but they're all opinions. And so at the end of the day, if you close off your ideas and your thinking to someone else and not willing to listen to somebody else's ideas, then all you're doing is shutting off the floodgates of information coming to you. And so I suppose coming back to that and bring it around full circle, and I do it in a long-winded way, obviously, by engaging with the general public per se and the reptile keeping community, I have more of an opportunity to learn more things about reptile keeping, and listening to podcasts and reading books about species that I'm never going to keep is another way that I can take ideas from that and go, I wonder if that would work in Australia. And so, one of the things that we've put up is UVB meters, and my wife thinks it's fucking hilarious.
Now, I'm laughing at the fact of I actually see what goes on when someone stalks you non-stop and you're sitting there saying that. So I'm just going to remind you of that when someone stalks you non-stop.
I must admit, sometimes it's a bit hard getting messages at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that when you go to sleep and things like that. But, it is what it is. So,
Yeah, that would definitely be there is that ready access, but then people get stuck in their own echo chamber where they don't realize that you are on Central Time here in the US. So it's probably a little different to be able to talk to you.
Overseas is one thing. It's people asking questions that I guess could easily be researched or could be asked tomorrow or whatnot, and they just keep going. That's what I was having a quiet giggle at when he was like, but every opinion.
I think too, I think the hard part is that, someone sees that little green light come on and they go, oh, he's active or she's active. At 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, you might be scrolling through Facebook or something fucking like that or whatever it is. And next thing you know, it's like this person shot you a message and you're like, well, you don't want to be rude, but at the same time, you're like, dude, it's 11 o'clock at night here. If this isn't pressing, can we hold this conversation off until tomorrow or the day after or whatever?
Right.
So, but you've got to be careful doing that too, because particularly if it's somebody that's excited and all the rest of it, you try to be mindful that you're not, you don't want to sort of rain on their parade either. So it might have taken some courage to send that message or whatever it is, or that they are genuinely concerned. At the same time, though, we're just people, just like everybody else, nothing special. And there's other fantastic herpetologists out there that are so much more qualified, experienced than people like me and Ty. And I sit there and I go, I wonder how many messages Steve Wilson gets, or how many messages Glenn Shea gets, and Wolfgang Worcester, and all these other people that are really brilliant in their fields.
Really nerdy people who are big into reptiles. That's who he's talking about.
Yeah.
None of those names.
That's why you wouldn't.
Names, Harry Green.
Nerds
Honestly,
nerds
of
like
all
me
the
would
names
message
you've
them.
mentioned, yours is the one that I've heard the most.
That's probably infamy. But yeah, look. In all seriousness, though, there are people out there that you've got some of the best reptile breeders in the world, some of the best taxonomists in the world, some of the best scientists in the world, and they're all willing to engage because they all have this genuine love for what they do. And you want a paper, if you actually want a paper and it's locked behind a paywall or something like that, there's usually a corresponding email address. If you send an email to that author and say, hey, really love a copy of your paper, I haven't met an author yet that hasn't wanted to send out a copy of their work that they've published, because they've published it because they want to tell people about it.
Yeah, for sure. That is one of the worst, I don't know, secrets, I guess, of science that the general public, or people who are in the hobby side of the science, I guess, are probably not aware of, is that they see the journal, they see paywalls, and they just shut down. And I don't know why it just never clicks to, because so many of those people are professors and they have a regular school email or what have you.
And it says at the end what school to find them at.
Right. And it just
literally
never
just
clicks
Google
to people.
The school and then look through
it
the
literally
personnel.
says after the name, it'll be like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. And then after that, it'll have corresponding email or corresponding author. That's there because they want people to correspond with them.
Yep.
Right? It's not there because they didn't want to put it there. They put it there because they want people to correspond. I suppose the difference between some people in the hobby and some people in academia, and and I'm no academic or anything like that, so I want to make that expressly clear. I get embarrassed if someone calls me a herpetologist or something like that. I'm not a herpetologist. I'm a naturalist. I'm an absolute amateur naturalist, because at the end of the day, amateur means for the love, and I haven't got formal training in it. I love it, and there's no shame in being an amateur. Okay. But there is a difference between somebody in the hobby that has a closed off mind and goes, oh, that academic doesn't know anything about X, Y, Z, because all they do is they study them in the wild. Mm. And then likewise, it's also the same in academia. That person doesn't know anything about that species because all they do is keep them in a box.
Right.
Okay. There is a collective knowledge between both of those groups, and you see it all the time. And the ones that really excel are the ones that are willing to listen to the academics, that are willing to listen to the hobbyists, and willing to listen to the professionals. But unfortunately, we all have egos, and we don't always want to listen to each other. And I suppose, again, that dissemination of information is such an important thing. And I suppose that's what I'm more passionate about than anything else these days.
Talking.
Yes, I like talking.
You kind of have to in order to do educational shows. So.
Yeah. I just think it's kind of weird that both of those groups, like, they doubt the other group's ability to extrapolate the information, right? So like, it's all you ever do is keep them in a box, so you probably don't know this stuff. And it's like, well, if I don't, maybe my box keeping would be awesome if I did. And then the flip to that would be, oh, you're just a book nerd and all you ever do is look at the genetics of colubrids. You don't know anything about keeping them. And it's like, well, maybe I would have better insight for the things I'm studying in genetics if you told me the weird stuff they do when you keep them. And we never take the other into consideration. You know what I mean? Like, there's that hard delineation, and then you're just like, you're an idiot past a certain point for what I do.
Yeah.
And then the other person is like, okay, well, you're an idiot past a certain point for what I do. It's like, maybe you're both idiots.
No
and if you
cooperation.
combine,
I'm pretty sure we try to teach that to our children.
Yeah.
Why do adults forget how to do that?
Yes.
But you know what? It's like that. It's like it's almost like there's this Chinese war between the two factions, and they love the war. Both factions love the war. As much as they want to talk to each other, they both seem to love the war, and they always don't. It's rare that you see people try and engage on both sides.
Sure.
And yet so many of the academics, and I'm not saying, I'm not tarring everyone with the same brush here either. So, so many academics have got their start, and they got their first love of reptiles and amphibians from being a keeper, particularly as kids. And then as they get older, they decide that keeping isn't necessary for them, and they want to do it as a career, and they move either into zoological institutions, or they move into research and surveys and things like that. And that's awesome. And then there's other people that go, you know what, I want to enjoy keeping animals, but I also, I'm not really for academia. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go be a plumber, or I'm going to go be an electrician, or to do whatever they decide that they want to do. And then they keep reptiles and amphibians as a passion for themselves. That doesn't mean to say that one is more versed than the other. And it doesn't mean to say that one doesn't love the industry in their own way more than the other. And I suppose listening to each other is a way of everyone gaining more knowledge.
For sure. Well, and I always think that's funny too, is that in the hobby side, the quote unquote really good people, or really advanced or skilled, or whatever you want to call it, are typically the people that are huge nerds for it. They read a lot, they consume a lot of content, they consume a lot of information, and then progress to keeping more obscure species or more difficult things or so on like that. And it's like, well, so you kept reptiles and then you improved your knowledge base using academia, and now you're quote unquote better at it? Like, why?
How do you not see that that's what that was?
If you buy all the same books as the guy sitting in the university, and then you read them and you consume the same information as the university person, how do you somehow think that the university side is a negative? Like, I would understand from the academic side where
you blew a god awful amount of money on it.
Well, true.
That's,
but
the negative. That's the negative. You blew a whole bunch of money on books. I blew a whole bunch of money on wood and enclosures.
Well, but I see the opposite argument, right? So if you're in academia and you have a person who keeps reptiles as a hobby, or just like one or two pets, and you think, right or wrong, that they probably aren't as educated as you on the subject, statistically, I would bet you're probably right. That person probably has not consumed as much information as you have in your academic pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
But for the flip, where hobbyists and amateurs somehow have a negative light for academia, that part doesn't make sense to me, because at least in the social media circles and the friend circles that we have, like, the people who are really excelling and are keeping harder to keep species, or just doing a really good job of keeping common species, are people that buy books and consume information and educate themselves. So why would you not? I just don't understand how they don't put more value on the educational part. But when you formalize it,
I think it might be because
they're bad
the person
people
who commented. Nobody wants to be told they're wrong.
Egocentricity in people these days means no one wants to be wrong.
Tessa's 100% right on that.
Yes, Tessa, I agree.
It's because at some point you're keeping an animal and it's thriving and surviving, and an academic who has a set parameter that is right is going to say, but you're wrong. And that person doesn't want to be told they're wrong.
But there's also a big
Fair.
difference between a subjective opinion and an objective fact. Okay.
Yes.
And people need to understand the difference between subjectivity and objectivity. Okay.
That is a very hard thing to teach adults, though.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know if you have noticed, but I manage a hardware store, and I constantly, no, just because you thought that they were doing something doesn't mean that that's what they were doing. Like your perception, objectivity, subject. But we as humans don't understand the subjectivity versus the objectivity, for sure. And adults, if you haven't learned it by an adult, you probably don't have it.
I suppose the thing is that when people want to be right, okay, and that's okay. But when people are using, if they're having a debate with somebody and they're making arguments towards a point, if they're using a subjective argument,
Scott, hang on 1 second. I totally thought that I could not figure out where the noise was coming from. It's the dog.
Sorry, if we leave it
No, it's
I
cool.
have no idea what
bad
you're
enough.
talking
Sorry.
It sounded like you were licking your lips really loud while Scott was talking, but your face wasn't moving. And I was like, what is happening right now? And then I saw that because your name at the bottom of the screen, and I just saw ears come up
You
behind
didn't
your
see him
name.
sitting in his
And I was
lap?
like, oh, that's okay. Sorry, I didn't want to. I interrupted your point, but it was
Aw.
a strange
Sorry,
licking sound. It was
Or the birds. Can you hear the birds?
I didn't say anything.
well, it is what it is.
She really enjoys listening to you talk. Let's just
Yeah, she's a very excitable little puppy, that's for sure. Yeah, but anyway,
where were we at?
completely lost my train of thought now.
As I was like, you definitely interrupted.
I knew that was
you
going to
have
mess
to
it up.
remember.
But I saw the ears, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's what it is! It's not them." And now, when people hear it on a podcast, they will know
apparently
what a dog licking itself sounds like.
No, that way, so everyone who is going to be exposed to authors and check out their book and all this good stuff will now know that they're not weird licking people on a podcast.
Okay. You're just verifying.
Yeah,
Good.
I'm helping the public understand.
Right.
I'm not so sure about that. I'm not sure about, there's a time and place for licking, but probably not on this podcast.
True. We actually have discussed that OnlyFans makes so much more money than podcasting.
I was like, what discussion are you referring
You make no
to?
money on podcasts. It costs money.
Yes.
It's very unfortunate.
Yes, it does. You are correct.
Don't get you can't do the wife look while we're live. That's not cool.
I told you that was my position in this podcast.
Thank you.
Is the wife look and the checking you.
Awesome. I showed you Ty's Facebook to say I thought you would get along smashingly because
I do have to
the
say
majority
I
of
love
her
the hair.
social media seems to be giving Scott a hard time.
Yeah, well, I'm used to getting given a hard time from the better half over here, so it's good, and so I should be given a hard time, I suppose, at times.
There's an opening there, but I left it.
Yeah, so I suppose it's interesting. The books that the last few books that we've done have been on working with sort of wild animals. I did a couple of husbandry books ages ago, and we're sort of working on another husbandry book now. So that's.
Oh, Mr. Don't Tell Anybody. Well done.
That's all right. We can say what we
Oops.
don't say what it is. But
people aren't gonna guess.
But at the same time, we're always working on different projects, and by working on different projects, it challenges you all the time. By working on these different challenges,
being married to you challenges you all the time.
Thanks.
Agreed.
See?
So I suppose what we're always trying to do is trying to improve husbandry. And, one of the things that we're looking at the moment is looking at putting UVB into all our snakes wherever we can. And obviously, with our lizards, we moved almost all the lizards that we had inside to outside. And I suppose
the change was phenomenal.
It was so great to see the different behaviours, particularly in our verandas. The parentes, as soon as they go outside, they become parentes.
And they look better. They eat better. The change was amazing.
And they're not quite as friendly as they used to be either, are they?
The others, I wouldn't. Yeah.
But I suppose that's the one thing. And then we've also, we kept land mullets inside, which are these beautiful big black skinks, get to about 60 centimetres total length, about twice the thickness of a New Guinea blue tongue or a northern blue tongue in their body. They're a really large lizard. Eat about 70% of their diet is actually fungi. They live in rainforests in groups. They go around. They form these communal family groups that can span 3 or 4 generations, all living around these huge buttress type logs, fallen logs in the rainforest. And we had them inside for 4 years,
probably about 6 actually.
6 years inside. Never bred them inside. Moved them outside at the start of spring the following season. We bred them
straight away.
Wow.
Every year.
And then had no problems breeding them after that. Same thing with the major skinks. Same thing with our Cunninghams. Same thing with a couple of other things.
Skinks.
That we were never really successful keeping them inside. The minute that we moved them outside is the minute that we really started to see a significant change. Now, we had them over full spectrum lighting inside. We had them with temperature gradients, and we had them with light cycles and all the rest of it. But there was obviously something that we were missing that we needed to move those animals outside. So now what we've ended up doing is we've ended up moving on quite a few species that we can't keep outside in southeast Queensland.
Okay.
The reason being is because we're willing to do so much to keep an animal, right? Everyone's, it depends on how much you are really interested in it, how much money you've got, and how much time you've got to spend on it, right? And so if you can spend all the time in the world and you don't have the experience to keep that animal properly, you're not going to do successfully with it. If you're successful, have the time and have the money to do it, that's what's going to make for a successful keeping. So we've decided for some of these species that we can't keep outside, then we've decided, no, we're going to move them on. Unless it's something that we're really interested in keeping inside, we're going to try and keep a lot of our stuff outside, with the exception of venomous. So
right.
A lot of our pythons now are outside, and we're seeing changes in the way that they behave. We're seeing changes in the how keratinized the scales are from being inside to going outside, and the scales then changing effectively in their morphology to protect them from the UV light, and they're metabolizing D3 in a different way than what they were in captivity inside. And so I think that's the one thing, always to be open to be changing what you're doing, looking for new things out there and testing things. And I suppose that UV light is one of those interesting things that you see people go, oh, this is the Ferguson zone for this species, and this is this for this species, and this is that for that species. You need to get out in the bush and actually look at what those animals are doing and look at the actual, take a UVB meter out with you and look at it, because the information that we're getting from us taking around a UVB meter for the last 6 months is really challenging some of the ideas in regards to what is apparent Ferguson zone for this species or that species.
It's his new favourite toy everywhere we go. Wait, I just grabbed the meter.
It lives in the door of my car, because if I find an animal first thing I do is I go and take the UVB meter and I put it right next to it, trying to get an idea of how much UV exposure that animal's getting at that time. Now, obviously, it doesn't quantify how long that animal's been sitting in the sun for, what the sun's been doing, whether there's been a cloud cover go over and all the rest of it. But it gives it a point of reference. And at the moment, we don't really have that. And so, you know, I was reading a paper that published the Ferguson zones for about 200 odd species or whatever it was. And is continually referred to as, oh, this species is this Ferguson zone and this species is that Ferguson zone. Well, you know, water dragons, I think, are like a 2, right? Water dragons sit in the sun all day in the rainforest. They might be in the rainforest, but they sit in the sun all day above a creek.
Right.
And above that creek tends to have a break in the canopy. And so while it happens to be a rainforest, they have really good sun exposure. Eastern bearded dragons and western bearded dragons and central bearded dragons live in a various sorts of habitat. They can go from open habitats to really closed habitats in certain places, right? So even in the mulga and things like that in Western New South Wales and South Australia and Queensland, where you do get bearded dragons
On sand.
Right.
I was going to say, where do you guys find your tile and paper towel forests? I never see postcards of that. I see lots of Australian postcards, but there's no tile. I just assumed you had paper towel trees in your backyard.
Yeah, and our beardies don't live on sand either.
No. Did you see that photo from Matt Somerville?
No.
It was fantastic. We'll share it in the chat or somewhere. We'll find it. But Matt Somerville had a photo of a bearded dragon sitting on a Hessian sack that was out in arid South Australia. It looked like it was on a hammock. It was bloody fantastic. It was great.
Yes.
You know, and obviously he's taking the piss there a bit. And
sure.
You know, the thing is though, is you see bearded dragons if you drive through, you know, country Australia. On the tops of the fence posts all the time is these bearded dragons sitting on the top of the fence post, right? And they're sitting in the sun for hours and hours and hours. And then it gets too hot and then they go down and then they do what the bearded dragons do. And then they go back up and sit up on top again. You know, so they're getting a massive amount of UVB exposure every day. Tympanocryptus, the little earless dragons, they sit out in the middle of the day on gibberstones. Some of them live on quartz fields. And I hate to think how much reflectance is in a quartz field, and these things are sitting out there baking every day for hours and hours and hours. You know, middle of summer, we get probably 14 to 15 hours worth of sunlight over here, right? And the temperature, average temperature for where those earless dragons, some of those species of earless dragons are living, is mid-30s to low 40s. And they sit all day out in the middle of that. And they're lifting one leg up and one leg down, and they lift their tail up, they arch their body off, so they're thermoregulating because it's physically too hot for them to be sitting on there because they're literally starting to cook.
Yeah.
But those things sit out there all day. Their eyelids have got sort of growthing on them, so that the eyes almost got their own built-in version of sunglasses on them, so that the eyelids are so thick and so sort of elongated that the eyes don't sit right out, but they're always wearing like these sunglasses, I suppose, in some ways. It's awesome, but that's what these animals are designed to do.
Did you translate it into American?
Yes.
Well, what was it?
30 was 86, 50 was 122.
There you go.
You said it, and I'm like, 30 degrees, like that's really cold.
Yeah, I knew there would be people that would listen to the podcast
Celsius.
that are going to think he's talking about freezing lizards in Australia.
Nope.
So
86 degrees to 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So
I've always thought, so I've never understood how, and I guess I don't really know, I don't know a whole lot about European keeping for bearded dragons, but I've never understood how in the States we got so far off the track, because to me, like, bearded dragons, that's just your Scaloporus. Like we have a ton of different fence lizards. Ours are smaller, but they feel the same. The scale structure looks the same. They live in similar places. I mean,
And by
it's
similar
just a
places, you mean
tiny
everywhere.
bearded dragon. I've never understood how the average American can't look at those two and go, oh yeah, it's just bigger, so we should keep it how those are kept. Like,
It's exotic.
Well, I know it's very exotic.
I don't understand why you guys don't keep them outside. Honestly, in the US, you guys could keep them outside.
We could in the summer. Well, and here you could in the summer, but we only max like 100 degrees, maybe 2 weeks in the summer.
Yeah, but there's huge portions of the states that could definitely do it.
Anything
that you can
south of Kansas, maybe.
Right, but anywhere you could keep chuckwallas or things like that, or that chuckwallas and stuff are native to.
Yeah, but that's not the Midwest.
Oh, I know. But I'm saying a chuckwalla is just a smooth bearded dragon.
Yeah.
I don't understand how people in the States can't just be like, hey, we have one of those, but it's not spiky.
And they do. And they do keep them in a lot of places like Florida, Texas. Well, not really so much Texas, but
right, the place where it would make the most sense.
Yeah, they do keep them outside. We just can't. I was actually, one of the things Bill showed me was a lot of your guys' enclosures. And all I was like, I really wish I could build that stuff outside and it would get more than 2 or 3 months of use. But the truth of the matter is I can't, I can't keep anything outside because we have really mean village ordinances that says we can't keep livestock, we can only keep pets. And it's like, at what point are we crossing the line for keeping a nice huge enclosure in my backyard?
That's weirder for us because we're technically a business. If you were just a pet keeper and you only had
but you can't keep other pets, you can't keep it's a village ordinance. You can't keep rabbit hutches, you can't keep chicken hutches.
Yeah.
So it would also depend on where you're at.
Did you have a fish pond?
You can have a pond, but it has to be decorative. So
isn't that a decorative pond? It just happens to have a cage around it to make sure that people don't fall in.
Well,
I've tried to do that. I've tried that argument. I've definitely tried that argument.
And like he said, right now we have our spur thigh in the backyard. And we have people that are like, are you allowed to keep that? And it's like, well, it's business property. So absolutely we are. And they're like, but really, is it? It's like, tell me otherwise.
And then we unofficially just added on to the garden and started keeping smaller tortoises in that section. So, but no, I mean, well, yeah, the fish thing is a good angle for that. But I mean, again, I'm not versed enough in
and everybody lets their cats out, so I wouldn't be able to keep bearded dragons outside because I would have to shoot the kids. Excuse me.
There's no reason. I mean, the one thing about, and people always assume that keeping outside is always easier. A lot of forethought needs to go into how you set up your enclosures and
for sure
design. And we made a critical mistake. I suppose I built the cage, so it was my mistake rather than Tyese, which ended up resulting in the death of one of our parentes.
We thought it was cane toad proof.
Wasn't cane toad proof.
And we had at the time Lacey's house with turtles, which I was dead set against. So I could smell something, and I didn't even think it would be the Lacey's. So I go in the turtle pit, and all the turtles are there, and the Lacey's are like, "Ooh, she's got food," and wasn't the Lacey's either. And then we went into the parentes, and it was heartbreaking. The live one was like this on top of the dead one, just hugging it. It was just, I cried. It was, it had eaten a baby cane toad.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have all of our stuff is covered. For us, it's cats. There's a lot of cats in the area.
Yeah.
Thankfully, our dogs are not what you call cat friendly, I guess, in a polite term.
Our dog is 150 pounds and is terrified of ferrets.
Yeah.
So he doesn't keep the cats.
We have the most useless guard dog on the planet.
He will not let people in the house.
Yeah, no people, but feral cats.
Feral cats.
All sorts of, I actually don't care about the people. More people would be scared to come into our house because they think there's just gators and stuff walking around.
Yeah.
I don't need people defense.
I know, except that's what our dog is only useful for. But yeah, the cat you do when you are, because we only did the turtles, and like we built them up, and we're like, so how tall do we have to build them to keep them from climbing out? Because turtles don't climb.
Yeah.
And then you do.
I swear to you that redfoot tortoises should be classified as semi-arboreal.
Gets out of the 2 foot tall edged enclosure regularly.
We hung out 2 nights ago and just watched him.
He would climb up the wall and get his foot kind of wedged in someplace.
He's like a mountain goat. Yeah. It's ridiculous. but they're tortoises, so obviously they're awkward with.
They're a mountain goat that lands on their back, and you kind of go, "Serves you right," and then like gets rolled over, and you're like, "Darn it!"
Even though he has their control isn't great with their back feet, and they're very flat, but like he's still it's railroad ties, and he's just pushing his toes in, and.
To like any
the
little
damn thing is a goat.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But yeah, and we literally haven't built anything else because we're like, so if we do this, we'd have to put some sort of structure. We'd have to definitely top it off because we have owls, and there's a couple hawks around town that regularly visit any part, and the turtles, like we had to provide some place for them to go and hide under so that hopefully they didn't burrow, and
which didn't work because the Russians did it anyway.
Yeah, the Russians burrowed anyways. But yeah, when you build the outdoor enclosures, it's so much more than I just put 4 walls and a top on top of it. You have to fill it with wood, and then are you using live wood? Are you using wood that's been cured? Like, it's a lot.
Well, it's when you build inside, you're super worried about the parameters you're trying to recreate, and then you don't really have to care about anything else because by definition it's contained.
Yeah.
And then when you go outside, it's like, oh great, the parameters are done. It's like, well, yeah.
So but now I don't have to do anything more than just make sure it's
right. But now it's literally everything else in the world.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole, dart frogs and stuff are so difficult because you're recreating a rainforest. And it's like, well, yeah, you are, but in a 3-foot box.
Yeah.
So like that's difficult for the recreation, but not for the tsunami in the rainforest.
Yeah, you don't have to take any natural disasters.
The reality of it is, though, is recreating that rainforest in a 3-foot box. The worst case scenario that's going to happen to that rainforest is that you're going to have a power failure, and that power failure is going to be out for a few hours, right?
Yeah.
Worst case scenario outside is a unseasonal storm of snow in your case, or sunshine in our case, or we had 1.2 meters of water running through the front yard one year where we got flooded.
The only year we went away too.
Our kids kayaked down the street a couple years ago.
Yeah, we've also
so we understand that one.
So this is the thing, right? So then when we build stuff and all the rest of it, we don't build it just for now. We build it for predators, but then we also need to make sure that there's thermal refuges that the animals can get into that will withstand them from very cold nights, but also very warm as well.
And the basis that we start off in is, will this house a goanna? We need to make it goanna proof for that odd, have this. So if a goanna can't get out, nothing else will. And we start from there.
And that's the thing, you're talking, polyethylene tubs and things like that, and then screwing them together and putting them together and then putting a welded steel frame on the top. And, I'm a plumber gas fitter by trade. So, I'm reasonably handy, I suppose.
And I'm coffee bitch.
We all got to know our parts.
We do. It flows a lot easier when you know your place, doesn't it?
At the same time, though, you have to take into consideration all of these things. And then at the same time, too, because we're not always keeping animals from directly around our area, and we're trying to go, all right, well, we're going to keep parentes. Parentes are found at a similar, are found at the same latitude as what we're at. But this is a much cooler, much more moist area than where parentes are found. So then we need to then make sure that we're keeping that enclosure drier, that we are providing areas that are in a situation that the animals can't get too cold, but then they've also got that thermal refuge. So then we need to build that into the enclosures as well. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
But then having said that, say the Parentes, for example, the two we've got outside are totally different.
Yeah.
One will burrow down the second it looks like getting cold. Second it sees Scott with like tracksuit pants and a jumper, she's out. You don't see her. Yet the other one was out yesterday.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have called it warm yesterday, and he'll go for a swim in the big water bowl. So, and that's the same animal.
Yeah. Same species, they're actually related as well. And, one animal's out in the cold, the other one's not.
I do have a question really quick. You said keep an outside area drier. I understand how you would keep it more moist because you'd spray or provide some sort of water. How do you dry it out outside?
Aha. So basically what you're looking for is like a... so we use a large plastic tub and then fill it up with dry lucerne. Okay. So lucerne is hay, straw,
Okay.
And effectively it's like it desiccates whatever's inside there, right? And so because that stays dry all the time, it's cool, but it's dry.
Okay.
Right? And so you have and because that's in a burrow, so that we dig these big plastic tubs into the ground. We put these big plastic tubs into the ground and then we cover them over with dirt, right? Okay. So the dirt acts as a thermal insulating barrier. There's drain holes in the bottom of it, so if they ever got water in them, they could actually sort of drain out. And then I dig down, cover off the top, open the top, change all the bedding inside there routinely, and make sure that it's super dry hay that I'm putting in. And by doing that, it provides this nice dry refuge. And the animal gets cold, but it stays dry.
I get it. I was just like, and again, that is a good example of it's not just a box outside that you put an animal in.
No, definitely not.
Nobody would because I would have been like, if it's got to be drier, it can't be outside, because how am I going to dry it out? It's in the summer here, it's humid. It's going to be humid. If it's outside, it's got to be humid. Yeah. So I wouldn't even have, which is sad because normally I'm cool with that type of stuff, but I wouldn't even have thought to dig down and actually make it like almost a second underground enclosure so that it could on top. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, these animals go through seasonality as well, and they can experience different things. It was interesting. We were talking about extremes of heat, but then also extremes of cold. We also seem to think from keeping animals inside that these animals can't be subjected to quite cool temperatures. So last night I went out with the temp gun, 6 degrees. All 4 diamond pythons are outside in ambush, ready to feed, as well as the 3 imbricata, the western carpet pythons. So 4 degrees Celsius, they're all out ready to go.
Somewhere Bert's ear just twitched.
Yeah. 100%. He does love imbricata. So
what's the American on that there? 6 degrees.
6 degrees is 42.
There you go.
So sitting, not just sitting there, but sitting there in ambush, ready to go, right? And I guarantee you that if I put a rat in there, that snake is not going to not eat it. He's just going to eat it, right? And I walked out before today, and the air temperature outside is about 16, 17 degrees right now. It'll get to about 22 this afternoon, so it's sort of low 50s to low 60s, I think, today, roughly. My Fahrenheit conversion's not great.
I literally just kept it on.
Right? So let's say 16 degrees to 23 degrees. Those snakes are all out curled up in the sun right now.
Yeah.
All right. And they're curled up in the sun. And guess what they're getting? They're getting UV. All right.
Weird how that happens.
We need to improve as reptile keepers and look to improve what we're doing. keeping animals in plastic tubs and stuff like that's fantastic for certain species. It's fantastic for raising animals and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that is the only way to do it, and it's not and even keeping in a plastic tub, there is ways that we can put lighting over the top. You change the lid on that tub, and we keep all of our tubs have lids on them, so we're not like those people that just have absolute drawers. We like lids because we work with venomous snakes, and
Sure.
the lid's another safe,
Never need to
safety
swap a
for us.
tub in a hurry.
100%.
Yeah.
But there's ways of putting UV light over tubs. And I'm trying to think who it was. I think it might have been Ryan actually was talking about Amazon tree boas and the way Amazon tree boa neonates behave completely differently when exposed to full spectrum lighting.
Yeah, I've actually got.
How many difficult? Sorry, go.
No, I actually have his male Amazon tree boa and one of my females, and am now going to be using their light over them. Yeah, and it definitely changes how they act for sure.
So I wonder how many of the lizards and snakes, and reptiles, amphibians that we keep out there that we think are difficult to keep aren't necessarily difficult to keep, but we just don't keep them within the right parameters because we're always trying to make them conform to what we think is right.
Sure.
So I do wonder if sometimes people would do better if they're willing to experiment a little bit and push the boundaries on a few things and see if an animal does need to get a bit cooler and does need to get a little bit warmer, and they don't all sit between that magic sort of 82 to 86 degrees hot end and high 70s cool end and water bowl and a hide box, and that I only need to see it when I feed it, and or when I put it in together with something else, or when I'm pulling eggs out of it.
Right. Well, that's like James Lewis. He's the Reptile Gumbo podcast. He got Rubberboas, and I mean there are pictures in older books and in different literature and stuff of Rubberboas on snow, and everybody always it's the North American boa and it can get real cold and all this, that, and the other, and we know that, or we think that we know that, and then he put his down to for brumation. He used a wine cooler and cooled him down to 40 Fahrenheit, and he came in, and then he was just talking about it a couple weeks ago, and he was not upset but kind of freaking out that they were in the tubs just cruising around, like they weren't hibernating asleep under the mulch or whatever. They were just out doing boa stuff, and it was 40 degrees, and he was like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, man, you've seen pictures of them on snow. Like, they're able to do this. And he was like, well, yeah, but that's not the same as seeing it. And then it happened in my house. He was just very taken aback that he conceptually knew that it was possible. But then when it really happened, it kind of solidified it for him and made him a little nervous.
Yeah, I suppose there's challenges about keeping animals that are in very cool conditions. For starters, it's got to be the right species, but then also too, what's got to be remembered is that a habitat has a temperature, all right, but within that habitat is all these tiny micro habitats, and those micro habitats have their own temperatures, they have their own humidities, and so while a location might have an air temperature that gets down to 0 degrees Celsius and sits at a relative humidity of 30%, there'll be places in that environment that are 5 degrees or 6 degrees or 10 degrees, and it's got a relative humidity of 70% or 80%. And so those animals seek out those refuges within those habitats. So we've got to start looking at not when it comes to design of an enclosure, you shouldn't be designing the enclosure based on the habitat of that animal, but the micro habitat that animal utilizes.
For sure.
I think too, what we touched on earlier as well plays part into it. A lot of people get an animal, and I'm not dishing anyone here in any way, shape or form, but I'm a big believer in researching the animal in its natural habitat to begin with before obtaining the animal. so you can see what's going on. A lot of people here say, oh, I like the look of that, I'll grab it. And why is it doing this? Why what's wrong with my animal? What's it, and if they'd researched the animal to begin with in its natural habitat, they'd have more idea on how to set up the enclosure.
Yep.
And everything else follows.
Right.
I think too, you can use that same methodology too for regards to habitat, to dietary requirements of our animals as well. Our animals are not designed to eat crickets.
I was just yelling about that.
Yeah.
They're not just eating dog food, they're just eating this. Particularly animals that live in the tropics, they go through these huge dietary shifts. And it might be, frillneck lizards are, there's a window of opportunity for a week or 2 weeks where there's a whole heap of grasshoppers that are moving through or something like that. So the frillies sit there and they get fat and sassy eating grasshoppers this week. But then 2 weeks later, it's a type of moth that's moving around. There's shitloads of a moth. And then there's shitloads of a beetle. And okay, sorry. There's lots of a beetle or lots of this or lots of that, right? Whereas in captivity, we tend to get, and we feed a lot of our snakes rodents and chicks and rats and mice, and we try to move them around a bit, but at the same time, they are getting a lot of the same stuff.
Right.
In the wild, they do not get the same stuff all the time, and it's important to try and change up that diet.
I talk to her about this all the time. Not that she can fix it for me, but I really like a lot of Indo species, and I talk to people that keep a lot of different colubrids from that part of the world, and then also into Southeast Asia, and how they aren't very prevalent in herpetoculture here in the States. And there are some folks that have some species, and it's smaller pockets of people that have put in a lot of work to them, and it seems that people really struggle. And it's just a ton of snakes that are really cool looking, but they eat lizards or frogs or whatever. And we are so stuck on, well, if it doesn't eat pinkies out of the egg, man, I don't even know what to do. So it's like, if you would just try, or even here in the state, or especially in the Midwest, in Illinois here, they're an endangered species. So it's a little bit of a different circumstance, but the Western hognose, has become a huge pet in the States, and they stereotypically are little fat sausages, and they have some neat colors and things like that.
Top hat.
Right. Yeah. They wonderfully wear a top hat. Well, they wear a top hat because they're morbidly obese. Because
you can get it on them because they don't run away.
But that's like around here where we live, there are tons of toads, regular, not cane, and that's their primary diet, and no one is raising common toads in the States, with the exception of one guy who was on Facebook that found an albino one, because then we care. But yeah, that was a whole separate thing.
We only appreciate it when it's a color mutation.
But it's this hugely prevalent pet, and then I never see adults. Mm-hmm. I see adults for some people that breed morphs and things like that for hognose, but for pet keepers, there's bunches and bunches and bunches of them at reptile shows in deli cups, and they're tiny and they're cool looking, and there's a million patterns for them now. And then I never see an 18-inch fat one sitting in an enclosure somewhere. And it's like, well, yeah, they get fat and die because that's not what they do.
They can't get them past
second
feeding.
Your baby never starts because they slowly succumb because they don't eat. But because that's not what they do. Like, if you just give them what they want, that's like whenever like the NPR guys, you'd always hear Owen talk about, I hate Dominican red mountain boas, and I'll never have them again, and they're so terrible, and I don't care that they're beautiful. And it's like, well, why was it such a big deal? And he's like, oh, they're super easy to keep, super easy to breed, they're great, and they want to eat lizards, and I can't do that.
So
Well,
we keep.
If they're beautiful and easy to keep and you love them, feed them lizards. Like what? Why is that so hard? I don't understand.
So we keep a whole heap of, a lot of elapids, particularly when they're young, they go through an autogenetic shift in their diet. So, they start off as being lizard and frog feeders, and then they move on to rodents as they get older.
Sure.
Some species stay as lizard and frog feeders. We have about 650 species of skink in this country. So skinks are extremely prevalent. And so lots of things eat things that are prevalent. And it's simply that our snakes, we basically don't have insect-eating snakes over here. Most, with the exception of blind snakes, our snakes don't eat insects for the most part.
Okay.
So they're eating baby lizards and they're eating frogs. Because of the way legislation is over here, you cannot feed them lizards or frogs. Okay, that's all.
Really?
Reptiles are protected, all amphibians are protected. Okay, so you can't go out and just, at the end of the day, the protection that you have, the legislative protection that you have for a tiger snake is the equivalent of legislative protection that you have for a garden skink. Okay, so they're just as protected as each other. Ethically, we also love reptiles, right? So to feed one reptile to another for us is a bit of an ethical conundrum. And so it's easy. It's an easy choice for us because we have legislation that says we can't do it, so we choose not to do it.
Right.
The thing is, though, is that you then have to try and basically best fit, get those animals off what their diet that they want to eat and get them onto something else. And so, using pinks, using fish, using all sorts of other things to get them onto rodents. And some animals, rodents aren't the best things for them. Tree snakes, we keep Dendrolaphus. Dendrolaphus don't like hair for some reason. And funnily enough, they don't like hair because they're designed to eat lizards and frogs. Lizards and frogs don't have hair, right? So when they get hair in the back of their throat, it's almost like it's got this thing that the snake goes, you know what, I don't want this, and they spit it out, right? And so we find that a lot of people struggle keeping colubrids over here because a lot of the colubrids want to eat things that are not rats or mice.
Sure.
And because a lot of people struggle, they have a very pretty price tag.
Yeah.
Right.
Boiga are the same, right? Boiga are the same, particularly when they're little. They want to eat skinks. They want to eat frogs. Once they get to a little bit larger, then they're happy to eat birds and they're happy to eat small mice and stuff like that. Okay. What we find with our Boiga, though, our Boiga tend to like small, fuzzy rats.
Or fingers.
Or fingers, yeah. they don't mind fingers either. Right. And so I suppose the thing is with it is that we try to find the food that's going to work best for those animals that we're feeding. But we also try to vary it as well. So if we've got a rat feeding snake, we'll feed it. If it'll eat chicks, we'll give it chicks. If it'll eat mice, we'll give it mice. And we cycle those different things through the animals. Particularly feeding animals that don't usually eat chicks, and we feed them chicks. It's not so much fun cleaning up after that. Or fish, you give them fish and then it's like, you walked in and
you need a gas mask to enter the room. It's bad.
It's not the most pleasant thing to deal with.
We've played that game.
But at the same time, it's really important for the animals as well because they're getting a whole different sort of mineral content. They're getting different vitamins. And it's also, too, there's something to be said for enrichment in our animals as well.
Sure. Well, and I mean, there's every chance that what that fish is cleaning out of them shouldn't have been in there. I mean, that, it works for human beings. I mean, but that's potential, if eating mice is the same thing as having cheeseburgers every day for them, and then you give them a quail, and that's a nice salad and some roughage. Well, that will change your life for a day or two. I mean, that I could see it working in the same vein.
And I think feeding like they eat in the wild too is also a lot more beneficial for the animal rather than pump feeding them and getting them to breeding size and breeding yearly.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, we've got to look at what, as a hobby, we need to look at what we think as being good and challenge that. Because at the moment, we think good keeping for the most part, and I say
this is the people here.
Yeah, oh well, such is life. People for the most part think that good keeping is having an animal that eats,
breeds every year without fail,
and breeds.
Yep.
Well, really?
And
really? That's our idea of what good is?
And they're not breeding for reproduction in the wild, you know what I mean? To keep the species going. They're breeding for the ching-ching, and it's...
Right.
Yeah.
But is having something that wants to follow its biological urges, are we saying that is good? Because I don't think that is good. I think that's like the absolute lowest common denominator and bare minimum.
Well, and if we compare that to any other thing in the world, including humans, that would be considered neglect.
100%.
Or how good is it on us if we were to breed every year?
But remember, we love these
things.
things.
Takes out of your body, it's
We love these things. You ask people out there, and they say they love them. They love them. Well, I understand that, but you're keeping an animal in such a way that you're not celebrating the animal for what it is, and you're not really enjoying it always. And so I think we need to be starting to look at, well, what else can I do? What's an improvement on how I keep? And what can I do better for the animal? And I think enrichment is a significant part of it. And, we do some simple things that we do, and it's really, really easy, is you take a hide box out of one enclosure and you put it into the next enclosure, right? Suddenly that hide doesn't smell like the snake that was in there or the lizard that was in there, right? And suddenly they completely change the snake that's just gone in there, that snake or that lizard, then starts to behave differently. It's like, well, what the hell else has gone on? And so it makes sure that animal is now wanting to move around the enclosure and interact with things like that. You get snake sheds and throw one snake shed into an enclosure from another snake and watch it go bloody crazy, right? We've had them eat the sheds, eat other snake sheds. Like, oh, okay, well, that's probably
still
a good idea.
But
we use shed skins, put a shed skin inside a snake hook, and then you go in and you actually cause male combat with another snake with a shed skin inside a snake hook. No risk to the snake or anything like no risk to the other snake. You're not actually fighting it, but you're getting that animal. It's firing things in that animal's brain that is not usually being triggered. And you can do the same thing with lizards. You can put dividers in between, take dividers out. I'm not saying you fight them. I'm not saying that you hurt them or anything like that, but I'm saying you change up their strategies. Taking branches out of pits and moving it into another pit is another really good way of getting things to challenge them.
And we noticed too when we'd moved some snakes around inside and we'd brought in some lizards because we were a bit worried about the winter, and we'd put them in older enclosures that were for pythons. The blue tongues and the elapids all use the arboreal hides that the pythons have. And over here, elapids climb apparently.
Yeah, they never climb.
It's okay to pick it up if it's up the tree because it's not a dangerous snake.
There's a lot of sarcasm if people didn't pick up on that then, but yeah.
But it's amazing what an animal will do that I guess hasn't been recorded or whatnot. So people just think it doesn't do it and don't think to offer it.
Right. Well, and that's...
I just read that comment from Eric Nielsen there in regards to Platysaurus with eating and body weight and breeding doesn't necessarily mean thriving. Exactly. And, I suppose that it's one thing that I need to challenge myself on that as well, because for a long time we were thinking the same way. Oh, look, the animal's eating, it's breeding, it's doing what it should do. Yep, it's doing what it should do, but could it be doing better? And that's the question that we're trying to ask ourselves now. And it's the same thing when it comes to the husbandry. What can we be doing better?
Well, that's, I mean, for us when doing the educational shows, so we don't breed anything. Well, morning geckos, but that's because they do it on their own.
Well,
But
and we've gotten random like, hey, I had a bearded dragon that laid eggs. Will you keep the eggs?
true.
But we
yes.
don't actually
But
do it.
for us, it's so that's never been like a checkbox for us to know, oh, we're doing good because we bred corn snakes this year or whatever. We just had 2 corn snakes. And so, there was no metric of they were able to produce that year. So we knew they were doing all right. It's body condition and seeing how they move and interact and things like that. And then it's a bigger deal for us with the giant pythons, and is something that we try to express to people when we're doing shows because we use berms and retics. And the berms, especially, people are so used to fat, derpy Burmese pythons that don't do anything and are just kind of yellow. It's the big yellow snake. It's this big yellow
banana
slug.
python.
Right. And, we get ours out
every time
at a festival or what have you. And our little male, especially, they're very active. They crawl around and they do python things, and they're sniffing the grass, and they're very interested in, because it's always a field or something like next to a facility, and obviously people have been walking their dogs there because you can just watch that python,
the dogs or
just
the squirrels,
looking,
rabbits,
and they're just going the whole time we have them out. And we really try to drive home the point to people that is like, that's how we keep, because feeding them is the fun and cool thing. That's why people have giant snakes, is to feed them giant stuff and put it on the internet. And so we counter that in that they only eat probably every 4 weeks for our bigger stuff.
Yeah. And
they do get fed seasonally. So when it cools off, they don't eat. They keep up their water intake so that, they're hydrated and so on and so forth. And then they get out at shows and they work, and they're never really going to be lean because they're Burmese pythons, but they're fit. When you hold that animal, you're not holding a squishy snake. You're holding a 13-foot python. And like our retic, especially, she's probably right around 10 feet.
Yeah.
And
I think she's 11.
And I always make the point to people that the giant retics you see in National Geographic or what have you are big forest dwelling predators that are typically going to sit on the ground because they weigh a whole lot. But smaller ones are going to get up in them trees and get away, so you don't eat them because they're scared of the monkeys running through the forest wearing hats. That's you. And I'm 6'2", and I'll do a show in a library or something, and we just tried to do a photo shoot with a lady, and the lady for the photo shoot was probably a foot shorter than me. She was very short.
She was shorter than me.
And that snake would not get on her. I mean, it crawled all the way to the top of my head, was checking out the room, very active.
I literally took the snake off of him, and I was like, "You need to leave, so that it will go to somebody else."
Yeah, I couldn't stand.
Move away from the snake, and then I squatted down on the floor with the snake, and was like coaxing it to crawl onto this lady while I squatted down because. Yeah. And anytime we get Morticia out, she goes straight up anything she can find, and I'm like. You need to be smaller than the lady who we're trying to get her to climb on.
But that's the thing is, her enclosure isn't 8 feet tall. We don't have an enclosure set up where I know she could climb continuously my height all day if she chose to. So
she also only does that though when we're at shows.
Right. But we're limited in our options for how her enclosure is set up. And it's sufficient for her and is healthy for her, but I know that she could do more. And so then you have to find another opportunity to do it. Right. And so that's me or a cat tree or what have you, because I know she'll express the behavior if I give her the opportunity.
Have you noticed that when you have animals out, when you're doing a demonstration and you've got a python out or whatever, and you're standing there in a group, that the pythons will come back towards you.
Yeah.
That
actually
just happened to her.
A show I did a couple days ago, everybody was like, "Oh, it knows who its mommy is," because I literally laid this. And I think Fester's like 9 feet. Laid this 9-foot berm out, and I would just take a step back. He would slither towards me. I'd take another step back, and he just kept like literally slithering towards me, and then he'd lay his head on my foot. And then I'd take a step back and he'd slither towards me and lay his head on my foot. And they were like, "Oh, it's he knows who his mommy is." And I'm like, "It's because I smell like I'm supposed to. I don't smell like a predator. I don't smell." Yeah. They're like, "Oh no, they know who's feeding him." And I'm like, "No, they don't."
That's always my thing is, so there's two camps on that, right? Is no, it's impossible. They don't have emotion. They don't know you. And then it knows its snake mommy.
Yeah.
And I
think they do know you, actually. I honestly do.
Well, I agree, but I think both camps are incorrect.
But people aren't saying
they
know you or they know that you're home. What they're saying is, "Oh, they know your mommy. They love you." And I'm like, they don't
you're doing a demonstration. You're getting paid for it. So you just go,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where I think they do recognize, but it just isn't our form of recognition.
Yeah.
You know, we put that.
So people anthropomorphize and go, yeah, it's a friendly thing, right? An emotional thing. Right.
We have a dog in a jumper sitting on our lap.
I know. Yeah. It's not. That's not what it is, right? What it is that, and this is, again, opinions are like assholes. We've all got them, and this is happens to be my one. My opinion is that animal knows that we are a familial environment to it. Okay, so we are some form of security.
Hang on.
In that an animal out in the wild, or that snake that's suddenly around nothing else around it, it's like, well, what the hell is this? It knows that this person or this object is familiar, and it knows that there's relative safety there.
Okay,
and so the animal comes back to you for that.
So we both, before we met, we both had adult olives. Olives are my favorite python. So here's Olive. Doesn't matter if I've gotten him out in a demo after it's gone straight up the chick in the mini skirt, goes back to him. My Olive comes back to me, and we both handle those olives.
Now, to give you an idea, the age of these olives, my olive is
nearly 40.
About 40 years old.
Holy cow. Wow.
And
I had it for 33 years.
Mine's 22. Oh, hang on, no. Not that one. 16? Yeah. It
was 16. So I've had my olive for 33 years. It was a wild caught animal then when I got it. It was a legally kept wild caught animal when I got it. And for that animal to have reached the size that it had when I obtained it, it would have at least had to be 4 to 5 years of age. So that animal is probably over 40 years old. And that's been doing demonstrations, starting off at scout groups and cub groups and things like that, and then moving right through. The whole time I've been doing wildlife demonstrations, this animal's been doing wildlife demonstrations with me.
But what I'm saying is...
And so it's used to me. The thing is when Ty and I met, and when we started doing demonstrations up here, we were using her olive python in demonstrations as well, because we rotate the animals to make sure that the animals get a break and things like that.
Yep.
I have my olive python out. If I'm not around, it'll go to Ty. If I am around, it'll come to me. And it's the same thing with her olive python. If her olive python's out and she's not around, it'll come to me. Oh, yeah, you're the second best, so to speak. I'll go to her. Right? And that's what seems to happen. So it's really a lot of these animals have got a lot more perception than what people realise.
And it's not like Scott's the only one that feeds his and I'm, you know what I mean? Like it is a joint venture sort of thing. Yeah. So, there's no reason, so to speak.
So there might be some form of imprinting or something like that going on. And we know that reptiles and amphibians do imprint, right? Because we know that turtles go back to sea turtles go back to the same beaches to thing. We also know that in certain species of skinks, they can recognise their mums and their fathers, right? And they don't tend to breed, particularly with social species of skink. Given the opportunity, they will not breed with their siblings and things like that. So there is stuff out there. There's papers out there on that. There's a new book, and we haven't got it yet. We do like our books, as you can see behind us. There's a new book on the social life of reptiles, edited by Sean Doody and somebody else, and I can't think of the other person's name.
That's offensive. I'm just telling you now.
Don't know what to say. I can't.
Sorry, that was a joke. Everyone's like, Scott, I love your new book, and I'm like, you made my shit list.
But I cannot wait to get a hold of this book and have a read of it, because it's going to challenge some ideas. That's for sure.
Sure.
And
what I've never understood is we recognize that, like, they have the ability, they have perception abilities, and a number of their perception abilities are significantly better than ours, or just wildly different, in their ability, using forked tongue, deriving direction from scent, having heat pits, and all these different things, and their ability to see in low light, in different, or to perceive UV in different spectrums that we can't. So we accept the scientific literature that tells us, well, we took apart a rattlesnake eyeball, and it doesn't see like your eyeball, and here's what it sees. And we know that, and we can prove it and show you. And we're like, okay. It's like, all right, well, if you look at Teresa through a UV processing eyeball, she probably has a unique look, just like she does through my eye. Like, why? I don't understand why that's difficult for people to process, in that, no, they don't necessarily love you the way you think, or want to be included in your pack like your dog does, or treat you like a servant like your cat. They but whatever way they process, why can't the same thing happen? Like, I know how you look, I know how you sound, because of the way I perceive how you look and sound, and I remember that, and I have that recognition. So what is the difference if they, just because the spectrum of vision that they have is different than mine, doesn't mean they wouldn't remember what this looks like.
We're going to remember.
There would be some memory and cognition. Sure, it is probably going to be different for as far as their, actual computer power in the brain.
But applying human methodology to something that isn't human is a problem in itself as well.
Sure. Yes.
They don't necessarily, reptiles don't necessarily have, like, they don't see in the same, or some species don't see in the same spectral range, or hear in the same frequencies that we hear in, because they don't have the same setups. They don't necessarily have the same brain, and the brain doesn't work in the same way either. And so, there is different cognitive effects in the way that they process information and how they process information. Whether it is not necessarily as advanced as what we like to think it is in people, because we have this egocentric sort of view that people are the smartest. Not necessarily the case.
We're clearly the pinnacle of evolution.
Yeah, apparently
that's very obvious.
Yeah. And this is, I suppose, this is my point, in that we have this idea that this is what things are and the way things are. It's not necessarily the case. Now, I'm not saying that reptiles are more intelligent than people or anything like that. I'm saying it's a different sort of success. They've
Sure.
got a different sort of success in their mind. And that, I think that we need to understand.
We can have a giant brain and opposable thumbs. You can't breathe underwater. And lots of things on this planet can do that. And they don't have thumbs or big brains.
Yeah.
Like, it's just different. I don't know. I think, well, the four of us are going to be different than your average person too, because we spend a significant amount of time around animals that don't perceive things in the way that we do. So, I mean, we kind of have to make some assumptions here and there, but like you watching the iguanas do what they do allows you might, I can't see necessarily what they see or perceive it in the way that they do, but I know what I can infer, right? Because I've seen it 50 times.
I can infer that our iguana hates when we eat food
but
because it bobs its head at us violently.
But
when we walk into the shop, if we're not carrying food, it doesn't care. The moment we bring in a paper bag from a fast food restaurant, our iguana will flare up at us and bob its head. It knows we're eating.
Yeah.
And nobody can tell me otherwise. It knows.
But I'm saying like that I don't know what about our actions when we do that, or because it's not just a McDonald's bag, right? It happens every time we eat at the shop. He gets mad, he gets upset, and he displays at us. He does all the things that we've seen him do at another male iguana, right? I mean, literally the exact same behaviors. So
can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you challenge this? Go in there with a paper bag with no food in it. Let's see what it does.
I was gonna say normally we take things out of the bag and eat it. So yeah, we'd definitely have to try that.
Yeah, because is he
mad? Because the paper bag could be looking like a dewlap to that iguana.
See, I was convinced for the longest time that he was getting upset because I had a beard.
He had a red beard.
And because but the bearded dragons do. The bearded dragon. The bearded dragons for sure display at me.
Yeah, the bearded dragons will display at you.
And one of our male iguanas has done it a few times, but not consistently. And then
so can you get your bearded dragons to head bob at you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Me especially. If I actually do.
Oh no! If we actually move our head, they'll head bob at us.
Especially if I show like the chin like that, they'll do it right back at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as it got longer, like they got more like upset. Like they shoulders into it.
The males started getting more, and now it's to the point where like the males will do it, and the females will run up beside and be like, yeah, me too, and start bobbing. And like, go sit down.
Can you imagine if you had a black beard? If you had a black beard, you'd piss them off so much.
Right.
Because it seems that bearded dragons, when they get real upset, their beards go black, and when their beards go black, that's it. I'm the biggest and meanest thing out there. So.
Well, we actually had to we changed our layout a little bit so that the two male iguanas couldn't see one another, because that was pretty stressful for them, and so we quickly fixed that. But they got to the point where they would do it at the male green iguana, and it was strange because he has no care for them whatsoever. Like he doesn't do it back. He doesn't in any way acknowledge that they're doing these things to him, but they absolutely, if they see him, they're going. I expect to see you other fingers and control experience from pissing off everyone. I'd
like to see how you get it through an animal ethics committee first.
Right.
I mean, you got to use more official language. We're well, it's green iguanas. I'm sure Florida Fish and Wildlife, they'd publish it because they hate them.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to show that you could get rid of your invasive species by eating more McDonald's. It'd be fine.
You can see that'll be on the next Macca's sort of commercial. It's like, and now with less iguanas.
Right. Hey, I need to hurry up and copyright that before
you do.
Somebody from McDonald's shows up and says, "So we heard you had an iguana idea."
It's any food. So if there is a fast food restaurant who would like to sponsor a podcast,
Yeah, who would like to sponsor a
Well
study?
done.
or a study.
I don't. Yeah, that would be interesting. So
on our wild caught iguana.
Yeah, that actually. Well, I wonder if that makes a difference. So the iguana that we're talking about was
feral for 3 months.
Yeah, he was an escapee from someone in town here, and spent the summer running wild in the middle of Illinois.
Yeah, at one point I went sprinting down the road for 3 blocks, screaming, "I need a box!" because I saw it. And I was like, I gotta catch this thing because everybody thought it was ours. I'm like, no, ours is in its home. Yeah, it's running down the road screaming, "Somebody get me a box!" And I got close enough to it, and it didn't run the whole time. I got close enough to it, and I stood there, and I was like, I need a box. I need a box. And some guy came tearing around the corner in his car and drove like straight at the iguana. It looked at me, jumped straight up in the air, spun 180 degrees, and just took off. And I'm like, I can't catch that. That was our first try on getting this iguana too. The second one, we caught it with a fishing net.
But that's the animal that doesn't like us eating in front of its enclosure. But it also spent 3 months exposed to the pup. Maybe it just understands that it doesn't like the big monkeys.
I don't know.
Because our regular green iguana, we've had him for years and years.
He's the longest, so we've had him.
Maybe it's tried McDonald's and knows that you shouldn't eat it. It's not good for you.
Right.
We actually don't. This is going to be horrible. We don't eat McDonald's that often. That was just
That sounds super fat and American right now.
McDonald's is like our least favorite fast food restaurants.
Don't try and church it up. We're American. It's fine.
We do eat, but it's just not McDonald's. It's just funny. But no. But yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, I suppose from our point of view too, I mean, it's so interesting to look at the way animals behave around other people and things like that. And you see changes. Blue tongues and dragons and varanids all, for the most part, seem to... There does seem to be some processing and some personality, for lack of a better term, amongst them. We didn't tend to see too much in our pygopods, which are like basically elongated geckos without legs. And with the geckos as well, they'd come for food and all the rest of it. They get to know you as a humanoid that feeds them and all the rest of it. And they may not necessarily run off and hide, but there didn't seem to be that interactivity that you tend to see with some of the skinks and some of the goannas and some of the agamids.
The Burtons used to come.
I wonder if it's more... I wonder if it's... And we've talked about this too with... It seems like our smaller stuffed geckos and things, you're just kind of a tree or what have you to them. But when you talk about coming for food and not necessarily hiding, it almost seems like it's the same process of... It's like if you station train or target train varanids or large iguanas or what have you, and for the really little guys, geckos and things like that, it almost seems like they kind of process it the same way, in that we're not threatening, and a good thing usually happens when this hand comes in or these silver tongues or whatever, and so I'll go there to look at the silver tongues and get the thing, but there's really no recognition like beyond that. It's just positive thing here, and your shape and structure is associated with that. Like most of our tongues and different forceps and things are silver, so a lot of our stuff has positive association to those pieces of equipment. And then when you,
to the point of like, we'll put a hook in the enclosure and they'll lick the hook.
Yeah, they check it first.
Yeah.
Oh, is this just a new way to transfer?
Right. But I want, like, there is some kind of line there, right? Where for us, it's really obvious. It's big lizards and then the bigger snakes and things like that. And then it just seems like the littler, at some point in that progression of size, I don't know, maybe if you're just too large to be, you're abstract to their environment, or like it's hard to process. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's one of
I'm
those weird
my
things.
Argus like a baby.
So, but anyway, a completely different subject. I didn't think we'd be talking about the perception of reptiles and amphibians on the cast today. This has been an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a tangent. So we are cruising to like an hour and 40. And before we finish things up, I do want you guys to talk about the book. I think it's a really big deal.
They have more than a book.
Well, I know they do have more than a book. But
I like you.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. I know my place.
I made the thumbnail a specific book because that's the picture I was given. So I figured that they would want an opportunity to talk about the specific picture.
Don't you go around.
I've got the loot. Why have I done?
Is he getting the book? A book?
Sorry, he's disappeared to the toilet.
Oh, I disappeared earlier because my daughter is cooking crab rangoon and burnt her hands and needed me to inspect them to make sure that they were going to be okay.
Great.
Is she all right?
Yeah, she's fine. She was like, I burned it here, here, and here. And I'm like, okay, well, they're not instantly blistering, so you'll survive. Did you run them underwater? Yeah. Then you really didn't need me.
You're doing something. Sure she did.
Yeah. Normally I'm hanging out on the couch with them during his podcast, so they're probably like, wait, what do we need? We need something. We need something right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I avoid them too. And Scott's like, no, you need to start doing them. So here I am.
Well, we did some, and I'm just like, I feel I would consider myself way less than now an amateur. If you're an amateur, I am way less than one. So whenever we go to do podcasts, I'm just like, and what am I gonna say? I'm there to harp on him. That's it.
Same. And it's like, I feel like I sound stupid next to you and you talk more anyway. So why do I need to be there?
No,
Well,
sorry, my nose itch.
We've discussed this though, in that. So Teresa got into reptiles after meeting me. So
didn't even like them.
Yeah, as far as like longevity in her peticulture or as an interest, it's shorter for her than it is for me. But for her, so she constantly tells people she feels like a new person. Okay, except. What year did we actually start the business that you technically own?
2012.
So 9 years ago.
Yeah, totally past a new person.
Which means you've been keeping reptiles.
He's had a snake longer than I've been alive.
I understand, but when you talk about her peticulture and social media and things like that, once you passed a decade, you can't say you're a new person anymore. Yet. That's for the business. For keeping, you definitely have.
Officially, then I'm still good.
Okay.
You know what? In fairness, though, someone who's just got into keeping reptiles or just got into keeping amphibians or just got into the hobby can teach somebody that's been around for decades as well. Because people that have been around for decades tend to have rose-colored glasses on things. They tend to have preconceived ideas.
Narrow vision.
100%, right? So I suppose one of the things that, I've been keeping reptiles a bloody long time now. And I suppose the thing that I've learned is that, after keeping for 5 years, I thought I knew a bit. And after keeping for 10 years, I thought I knew a lot. And then after 15, 20 years, I started to realize actually I knew bugger all. I stopped. I caught myself.
He caught it. It was.
We're like sailors, all right. But in fairness, though, every time I think I have sort of somewhat of an understanding on something, I see something else and I get completely challenged. And it was interesting. I was reading a paper a little while ago on, it was a paper on sea snake auditory behavior. And sea snakes can hear, right? Now, granted, their auditory perception is not the same frequency as what it is in a person, but they hear sounds between X frequency and Y frequency. They can hear. For 20 years, I've been telling people that snakes are effectively deaf. That's completely wrong, right?
He just said he was wrong.
100%, right?
And
100%.
it's recorded.
Don't worry.
For
When I
posterity.
make the
That's
the
all right.
episode, I'll send you the link.
Right? So I suppose the thing is, and this is what I'm trying to get across, is that we can have an idea that we've had for over 2 decades in that particular case. I can read one paper and realize, you know what, I'm wrong. And this is people saying, I got it on film, etc., etc. Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Emma, I love your guts.
At the same time, though, right? Because we didn't know or whatever. Now what I do, I've changed the wording that I give in the demonstration. I say that snakes are effectively deaf or functionally deaf. All right. But some snakes, ones that live in water, have learnt to be able to use sound waves as a way of actually communicating and learning more about their environment. And so that's not a problem. That's not something that's incorrect. But what it is that we need to start challenging ourselves and be open to change. And it's new keepers and new people into the hobby, for lack of a better term, are the ones that tend to make a lot of these. They challenge these assumptions because they're like, well, they don't know that everyone seems to think that this is the case or that is the case. And so, don't sell yourself short because you've come into it recently.
Well, and my big thing is for her. So in our social media circles or whatever, and friend circles, we are fairly well known for enclosures, and we have, for herpetoculture American standards, our enclosures are quite large, and we full lighting and so on and so forth. And people, like you made the comment a little earlier about folks that keep saying about his new book and how that got you. People talk to me all the time about our awesome enclosures. And then I'm like, hey man, she builds enclosures. Like I know a lot about reptiles, and I probably know more about reptiles than she does. And then I tell her, hey, we have this thing and this is where it lives. And I need to do this for an enclosure. And then she tells me that's stupid and impossible. Or she says, okay, you need to buy this, and then I'll put that together and I'll build this or do whatever. And then the end result that you see on Facebook or whatever is a super awesome enclosure. And it's usually me posting or commenting. So then it's just, oh yeah, like you're really great at building enclosures. And I was like, dude, I don't build a whole lot of stuff. Like she works full-time at a hardware store and that's what she does. And then there's like that weird disconnect, I suppose, that a little bit of it is probably men and women or what have you, because that's, building stuff.
What?
But no, but I mean,
yes. Oh, we get along fine.
But that would be
that's a thing.
I don't necessarily think that on the herpetoculture side, yes,
I think there's
still some of
changing.
That. But
there is such a big sexist disparity towards women, in that they think that for some reason males seem to think that women don't know how to keep reptiles or whatever it is, and they seem to gravitate towards men.
This day and age, Scott will introduce me, and they'll look me up and down and then turn back to Scott.
It's rubbish. Ty's the one that runs most of the collection. I've got a 40-hour-a-week day job as well. And so I'm doing that while Ty's working in the collection and doing demonstrations and things like that as well. So it's not just...
I get so many times, so you look after the geckos.
Well, that's like for me.
I think that changed a lot with us, mostly because I like really big lizards. So it's like Bill's over here playing with like an egg-eating snake, and I've got a 30-pound Argus monitor that I'm carrying around in a baby carrier on my hip. And people are like, does she need help? It's like, no.
Well, that, and so I took a different assignment in my day job, and so I'm here a lot more now, but for probably the last 10 years, I traveled a ton. And
yeah, the first probably 5 or 6 years of us doing the education shows, it was 90% me.
Yeah, a lot of them.
And did you get, is your husband coming?
No, they would be like, I talked to Bill. Are you with Bill?
Because people would Facebook message us, and I would be responding, and so if my phone's always on me for work and stuff, so I would respond to messages or set things up or whatever, and then because you don't like to be on podcasts or in pictures.
There was lots of pictures of Bill.
There were tons of pictures of me or just the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would show up. It did get better to the point that we messed people up, because she would do shows year over year. Then it's like year 3, and then I show up and they're like, where's the reptile lady? And I was like, no, I'm the reptile guy. I'm married to the reptile lady. And then they got very, very confused. Yeah. But yeah, they're definitely, I mean, at probably half the life of our business, you were the majority person doing the shows. And I love that super masculine dudes, like hardcore bro people, always try to talk to me because I look like that. And I know that. But it doesn't matter when you get out a 12-foot python, or in my case, when I get out a 3-inch tarantula, and none of them want to do it. And then it turns out that all the invertebrates belong to our 12-year-old daughter. And then she's very, very short, you know, and she walks up, or Teresa's like helping kids hold cockroaches or whatever. And yeah, the whole bro culture thing dies pretty quickly when that comes out, because it turns out that you can be a gigantic bearded biker looking dude and still be scared of snakes.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, I think perception is slowly changing in the hobby is becoming more open to women, and that more women are being sort of championing themselves a little bit more. But I think too, it comes down to personalities as well, is that, you know, I've got a pretty strong personality. I'm an extrovert by nature, and you know, I guess,
a media whore is what you're trying to part.
Yeah, I'm a media whore. But I think in a lot of ways, Bill, you're sort of fairly similar. Whereas Tyese is very happy to take a sit back and go, you know what, you can do all the promo shit because you're happy to do it.
I also don't like all the crap for the most part that goes on Facebook.
I see that you're laughing because we did just meet the Australian version of us.
Yes,
I see that.
Yes, we did. Except he can't grow a beard.
I can't grow a beard. We fully tried, right? There's a photo of me somewhere, and 18 months, and it was down to like there.
It wasn't that
and
long.
It wasn't.
Don't give yourself
and there was still nothing here at all.
He just looked like feral, like he hadn't had a bath in a month. I love you.
That's all right.
I love it.
But anyway, touch is life. So I suppose, and you know, from going and doing, you know, we've ended up writing some papers together and stuff like that, and then this book thing came along, and I'm like, well, I can't do it all by myself. Do you want to crack on? And she's like, yep, all right. And what a test! What a test of happiness this one is writing a book with your partner. Because you're
actually okay, really, until it comes to the proofing.
Yes, the proofing,
and we're both
and the
stubborn and pig-headed, and I want it my way, and he wants it his way. And I guess we read different things as well. He reads to learn, and I read, I guess, to learn, but I also read for enjoyment. And you don't really read for enjoyment.
I enjoy the act of reading, and I enjoy the the act of sort of generating bits and pieces, and I like reading as a purpose. It's a
but
bit
I also
like
enjoy getting lost in a novel as well.
yeah,
You
whereas
don't.
I don't have time for that in my mind.
I do, because I don't do anything all day. You come home and look after the collection.
yeah, apparently. But it's the same thing with photography as well. I really like taking photos, but I like getting a photo of what I actually want, whereas not on camera anymore. I really like getting photos of things, and I have a preconceived notion of what I want in that picture and the way I want to frame it.
And my photos are wrong. I'm not taking it right.
And so we're taking photos together. It's a real struggle because I'm like, that's not right. Do it like this. No. And she's like, no, I'm doing it my way, and that's fine.
But you know what it's like. You pick your battles, don't you?
We haven't had to take photos in a long time.
I can see you in the camera giving me the side eye. I don't even have to look to know it's on the screen. No, ours is,
Here, I'll fix that for you.
Thanks. Ours is probably so we don't present shows the same way at all. We don't present at all. Because
when we do shows, I will literally I just get things out of bags because I'm like, I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to.
Well, for me, it's depending on which. So we have a kind of a set core group of animals that we use, and I know what I want to say about them, and I'm very comfortable in my knowledge base, and so I give them whatever lesson I want to give them. And I have no issue if they ask me weird questions or the 6 and 7 year old kid questions that you're like, I never thought about unicorns. I don't know, and I field those fine. Whereas Teresa is much more like Teresa is a mom. And so but for her, it's much more like telling a story to younger kids. And she relates it more that way because
the boys go into show mode.
Well, but because we have 3 kids, and so she has told little kids stories and relates it that way, and she just falls back into that really naturally, and it works awesome. And then my way I've been really successful with, but they're totally different. So we just did a show together, an outdoor show for a summer camp type thing. And I was going around and I would give my little spiel about whatever. And then we had 2 of each thing to split the group, and she would take one and I would take one and we would go. And then I forget which one we were doing, but you took over talking about the species because I did cockroaches. It took too long. Anyway, what I was doing was taking too long because it was a really big group. And so she took over to talk about the next thing that we were going to do. And it just, like, you could see, it just sounds totally different. It's not the same style that's happening. And everybody kind of, and they were all fairly young kids. And they kind of did the pause. And, like, you could kind of see the mental pivot where
you can see them shoot,
because I look like the guy that comes to your school and presents reptiles stereotypically, and she probably looks like a soccer mom stereotypically. And so you could, like,
normally I don't normally
deep
I have
water.
like rain.
Deep water.
But like
the lady,
but the lady that ran the camp was a middle school teacher, and shorter hair, talked like a mom, sounded like a teacher, a lot of similar mannerisms to Teresa, and she kind of ran that camp with an iron fist. She had a sports whistle, and she was running the camp, and so you could see the kind of transition with the kids of like, oh, we have to listen to this lady now because we're supposed to because we're in school, and it was definitely a different response.
But it's interesting.
So Ty got as much. Sorry, go ahead.
So Ty and I, when we do demonstrations, it's not the same. It won't be the same. It never will be the same. And the reason is, and what we found is that
you're bossier than I am.
Yeah, probably. At the same time,
still see you.
Yeah, I wanted you to see
I know
it.
you wanted me to see it.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
was subtle.
Scott
Just
was
said
Scott was
we're
making a
the
point
same couple.
We are.
about the differences in presentations.
So when we deliver those presentations, the thing that we've found that works best is for us to deliver our own presentation. Because for me to try and deliver the presentation that Ty does, it ends up sounding fake and frankly, it's rubbish.
And when I do his, it sounds like I've rehearsed it and read it, and
it doesn't work. And so we've found that taking that more organic approach and being ourselves and delivering effectively the same message in our own unique way ends up meaning that you're communicating better to a crowd. And when you're having that one-on-one discussion afterwards,
you've mellowed in your old age.
Maybe you just warm me down.
We'll go with that. I'm happy.
But then when you talk
to
people, it does, doesn't it?
But when you're talking to people at the end of it and you're having that one-on-one interaction,
they can see that if you were doing your husband's or vice versa, that's not you anyway.
It doesn't, and it ends up coming out that's not quite right, and it's not a genuine experience. And if it's not a genuine experience, then you're not going to have the same amount of
feedback and enjoyment.
Feedback, and it's not, the energy is going to be poor at the end of it.
Yeah.
And it then becomes more like a chore as opposed to something that is really an interesting event. I still get excited about talking to kids about reptiles. And one of the things for me is that I don't know when I might be talking to the next Hal Cogger or the next Rick Shine or the next Harry Green that hasn't become that herpetologist yet or hasn't become that ecologist yet. And that, this reptile demonstration that this person's in front of, that, we're getting to sort of show reptiles to these kids for the first time. You never know if that's going to be the point in their life that they change to become this next champion of conservation or this next champion of animals. And I suppose that's the part for me that's exciting.
Well, and if you listen to podcasts and things where folks are being interviewed, plenty of them that are our age or older have said, oh, I had a passing interest, or, my parents were cool with pets or whatever. And then I
went to that herpetological meeting
and
got a signed book. I'm pretty sure we started this podcast with that story.
Yeah. But and now that's us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, and that was a big thing for our shows was when I was a kid and you had those, they brought like 3 giant things. One of them was always an alligator and nobody got to touch it. And
except for the student of the month.
Yeah. And I hate that. And so we don't do that. It's much more hands-on and much more interactive because that really influenced me from when I was a kid. And then we've been doing it long enough now that like I've seen people year over year and 5 and 6 years and things like that. And it genuinely does. Like you have people that, they became 12, 13, 15 years old and they don't care about animals anymore. They have a different interest or sports or girls or whatever. And then, but you have those 2s and 3s kids and groups of kids that like still bug you on Facebook or ask to borrow books or we went to a reptile show or whatever. And if you do this long enough, you can actually see it, especially a lot of our shows are pretty local. So we see a lot of the same people annually type of thing. So Ty, Emma made a post here about your group and would like you to talk about your group. And we need
chance. Please. I can't talk about it. I'm not allowed in. And
reading that, I don't think I am either.
I shouldn't be allowed in either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not.
You tried, remember?
I did not. Thank you very much.
Show me. Give me a look. Quite often I'll be told, can Scott answer that? Rah, rah, rah. Do you actually know what you're on about? Rah, rah, rah. So
it's the quickest way to piss me off too, you know. So if someone wants to ask me a question and they ask it to Ty first and then they dismiss what she says, coming to me straight afterwards is not a great move. I can give you the tip on that as well.
Well, they'll message the business and I always put my name on it because they just assume they're talking to Scott. And sometimes I'll get, oh, is Scott around? Goes down well. And I'm not the only girl that feels this way. A lot of chicks are sort of don't comment or whatnot because, and I hate saying this sort of stuff because you just sound sexist, but it's true. It happens. It's not sexist. Yeah. So I just started a group called Herpers on Facebook where, you've got to obviously be female to join. And you can ask the question that you were too embarrassed to ask on a Facebook group or show off your animals or, showcase your business, which is, run by you or whatnot. And it's called Herpers. That's the longest I've spoken on a podcast ever.
I know.
That's why he leaned back, allowed him to take front and center.
I think at the same time, though, too, Ty started the group with this idea that it was going to be a safe place for women to talk about herps and express and not have the dick swinging contest that reptile people seem to have. And it was also a place that, you've said to me in the past that it's been an empowering thing for you as well, and that people are happy to talk and have conversations that they wouldn't necessarily have in some of those reptile groups that are out there. So, I think it's a great thing. And
I've got some great help off some great admins too. So, yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
See, it is Australian, it's Australian based, obviously, because that's where I am. But we would love some more international women, just because obviously we are short of a zoo, probably, and travel, never going to get to see what you guys all can keep. And we love seeing the posts of stuff that we're never going to get our hands on.
Grass is always greener, isn't it?
Always.
We actually were talking about that
in a blink of an eye.
we were talking about that today when we were going to get stuff for dinner for the kids before the podcast. I showed her the pictures that you sent me on Messenger, and we're talking about, we would have plenty of stuff to talk about here, and I had seen bunches of your stuff from different posts and things that you've made, and I showed it to her, and that was her thing, was like, that's all the coolest stuff. They live where all the coolest stuff is.
Of course, we'll have plenty to talk about.
But
I also might never want to visit your country because you guys do have really cool stuff, but it all wants to potentially kill you.
Only if you touch it.
The thing is that,
did I not tell you about the baby lizard I carry around? I want to touch them. And that's also one of the reasons I don't know if Belle's ever mentioned it, but that's one of the reasons we can't keep venomous, is I'm terrified I would try to catch it. If
it's a methodology change in the way that you work with venomous snakes.
Yeah.
And
I use a hook for everything now. The boys laugh at me, but I put on the music and I go, and I know where things are. So when I'm cleaning, Scott has a couple of times forgotten to change the tags on the enclosures, like in the tubs. So I pulled out a tub, reached in, got my hands on an adder. So now I just use no bite. I just use a hook for everything, because if I'm not paying attention and I'm singing along to the music as I go, I've got a hook in my hands.
Yep.
You adapt.
I think I would, but I think it would take enough time that I would just be terrified that I wasn't keeping the animal well enough, because I'm like, I don't want to. If I do it wrong, bad things happen. But like I catch things.
But you learn from your
lizard
mistakes.
jumps out and I reach under and catch it.
So working with venomous snakes is a whole mindset. So we do not have any snakes that we handle from within the collection that we don't treat effectively as like a venomous snake. So whether it's a python or not, we're opening the enclosure with a hook and we're doing all of the stuff, because you end up, being really good at using hooks because you use hooks all the time. And you know what? I don't like digging python teeth out of my hand if I don't have to. And I can use a hook, and it's not a problem for me.
We could hook chocolate out of the fridge with a hook.
You know, and that's the thing. So
Yeah.
Well, and that was the thing for us. Well, and for Teresa specifically was so in Illinois, you have to have permits for things that are endangered species, either state or federal. You have to have permits for crocodilians, a few species of monitor lizard, and anything venomous. And then there's 2 levels of permit. So we aren't allowed to have non-U.S. native venomous at all, unless it falls under the secondary permit, which is all rear fang stuff, which gets a little weird because like we can keep all sorts of boiga on the secondary permit, but on my top permit, I can only keep like rattlers, copperheads. You know, I can't keep anything exotic. It gets a little weird in kind of a gray area there where you get that secondary permit and things start to become foreign and exotic. But it's based off of whatever our Department of Natural Resources classifies as rear fang.
So how does that go with, you know, dipsadded snakes such as heterodon? You know, right. a Western hognose snake, which you were saying before, is a rear-fanged dipsadded.
So our state is very
our state
weird.
Doesn't consider that venomous.
So our state that falls under so Western hognose for us would fall under endangered species. So it has an endangered species permit for Illinois. If you had like Southern hognose or Easterns, I can have those all I want, and they don't have to be on my secondary venomous permit, or they don't have to be on Teresa's secondary venomous permit, not mine, because they're not endangered in Illinois, and it's just very convoluted. Like our state doesn't recognize subspecies, and one of the endangered species in Illinois is the Illinois mud turtle. Well, the Illinois mud turtle is a subspecies of yellow mud turtle. And so when I talked to the state, I said, hey, I would like to get yellow mud turtles, and I'll display them and just explain why this subspecies is endangered here, because it was granted classification as a subspecies, and then we recognized that it has poor habitat here. And the state was like, well, we don't recognize subspecies. It's your so it's very convoluted. But
it's also a fairly new law.
It is. But in this process, you have to be inspected. And so we had our inspection for our crocodilian and for our endangered species and things. And our state inspector pitched to her so hard to, if you get your venom, because you have to have hours and education, continuing ed and things, and pitched to her so hard, if you had your venomous hours and your wonderful enclosures, and I like your facility, and you do educational shows, and he just talked her up for probably 20 minutes. And at the very end of it, she was like, I don't keep venomous things because I'm afraid I would touch them. Thank you. And just shut him down. It was like, I don't do that. It was kind of awesome.
I think until the kids are gone, it would be.
I just think it's funny that in our hobby, so many people think that that's the best, you're the best,
that's the pinnacle,
because you do that, and then you are just like, no,
well, there's someone in North Carolina that would suggest differently.
Oh my god, right? Oh, so terrible.
Lots of news.
Yeah, that's awful. See, and
but this is why we have legislation, though, isn't it?
Right.
It's because of things like that.
And actually, I forget where we were commenting back and forth, but you had made some comments about that too, in that, that's why we have legislation, but then a little bit, you can't really blame them, right? Like, I don't want people to make rules that say I can't keep stuff, but I understand why people make rules that say that idiot can't keep stuff, because he's an idiot. And it gets hard to. Then you have to justify to people that, well, no, I'm not an idiot. That guy is, and
one stupid post on Facebook can undo a lot of good.
Right.
Yeah. You were saying earlier, it takes forever to get a good reputation. It takes one comment to get a bad one.
Yeah.
I suppose, that, people go, all right, it's unreasonable for the general public. It's unreasonable for most people to be having venomous snakes at the neighbor's house.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand that. They don't see that as being a normal thing.
But if you offered them a tiger or a lion or something like that to grow up from a cub, they'd jump at it. It's just what they perceive as cute.
Yeah.
And acceptable.
I suppose what I'm talking about is not animal keepers at all.
No, it's the general public. That's what I meant.
So the thing is that the general public has this perception out there that keeping venomous snakes is on the verge of lunacy, right? Much as keeping a lion or a tiger is a bad idea as well.
No, not necessarily. They see it as cute. So
the general public don't think it's cute. The general public,
they see it as a cat. It's a cat, which is tameable. This is where we differ a lot.
I see where she's coming from, though.
So the general public, for the most part, thinks that keeping venomous snakes is not a normal thing. They accept that people keep reptiles as pets, as you see that reptiles have become more mainstream, right? So they understand that ball pythons and bearded dragons and things like that are relatively normal. What they don't see as being normal is somebody keeping a cobra or a taipan or a mamba, right? They think that is dangerous. And yes, frankly, it can be. It can be dangerous to keep those if you don't have experience and you don't have the appropriate facilities and all the rest of it. And so what people do is they go, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do something about it. The only way that legislators can do something about it is enact a law. All right? Mm-hmm. No matter how difficult it is for a law enforcement officer or an officer of the court to actually police that law, they enact a law. And the easiest way that they can do it is ban it. And so rather than regulate and have various levels of things, they just turn around and say, no, you can't do it. And most of the general public turn around and go, you know what? I agree. It's not a good idea for Farmer Bob to be having pet cobras in his house because that cobra might escape and it might bite somebody. Well, unfortunately now people can Google escaped cobra in Rayleigh and they can actually present a case where someone did have a cobra get out.
Right. Well, and
is that cobra any more dangerous than the timber rattlesnakes that were cruising around those same suburbs and the copperheads that are cruising around those same suburbs? No. It's another venomous snake. Venomous snakes, for the most part, are as dangerous as people want them to be, which is if they interact with them, that's when it can go badly. If they don't interact with it, the snakes don't see people as a threat and they don't try and bite them. So what ends up happening is that
when she said earlier the law was fairly new.
Fairly new.
So that's how that happened with us. Is the man who came to inspect us is the man who actually wrote the law, and in 2015, and so he's pretty cool. So I was able to kind of question him a little bit on things. And I just asked, like, hey man, you don't recognize subspecies, and you wrote some of the things in that law, if you are a reptile nerd or are into herpetoculture, seem kind of stupid. Right. And I was like, look, man, I work in law enforcement. I'm not going to break the law. I'm going to do what you said I have to do to have this business and to do it the right way. That's cool. I got no problem. I just want to know why you wrote it in a way that we as reptile people, and he is as well, this man also keeps reptiles, and it just didn't really make a lot of sense to us. And that he straight up told us for the both of us, especially when he was talking to Teresa about the venomous hours, he was like, look, man, I wrote the law so that
I could get
50
enacted.
lawmakers in Illinois would say yes.
Because at that point,
because
before that law, we couldn't keep any venomous, we couldn't keep any reptile that was considered dangerous. So any large monitors, and then you couldn't keep anything over, what was it, 12 feet?
Yeah.
Couldn't keep any snakes over 12 feet.
And so he actually is,
and crocodilians.
Yeah.
So he was like, I was writing something so that if somebody wanted to keep them and they did jump through all the hoops,
they could.
There's a framework that they can go through.
But 50 people who had to agree understood it.
Right.
And he was like, so it was basic.
So USARK had the thing, what was it? Was it 2 months ago? South Carolina was going to basically going to have a whole heap of shit was going to get, so right, that's it, grandfather permit, single animal, $10 fee, not allowed to breed it. Once it dies, you're not getting it back, right? And that's it. And there was a whole heap of people. And Justin, who was on there, was one of those people that was going to be affected. He's keeping Boyga Cyanea, who was successfully breeding them and doing stuff with them. And he wasn't able to, he was going to get in the shit over this moving forward because he wasn't going to be able to breed them anymore because Boyga happened to be on that list.
Right.
So USARK did what they needed to do. People in Southern Carolina did what they needed to do, and worked really hard about getting that legislation or effectively thrown out. All right, and it didn't pass. And yet, 2 months? Fast forward 2 months, and National News a venomous escape thing in North Carolina. And those same legislators are like, we should have done this 2 months ago. Look what you guys have let us get through.
Now
when we come back and review this in 5 months, there's not going to be anyone that's saying that this is a good idea.
Right.
And it's the thin edge of the wedge. What's ended up happening is you have a piece of legislation gets passed, banning a particular group of animals or whatever. And they go, right, okay, well, you're not allowed to keep exotic venomous. Well, that's fine, but I don't think you should have exotic constrictors over X, Y, Z. And then you shouldn't have crocodilians, and you shouldn't have this, and you shouldn't have that. So it is important to make sure that, effectively the community itself polices itself, because if they don't, someone else is going to police it for them.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's I complain about that for not just reptiles, but for a lot of different things, because I have a lot of hobbies that have more of a dangerous element. And one of my favorite stickers for almost all of them is "Stop making stupid people famous." And it pretty much applies to us really hardcore, especially with the advent of things like TikTok and the shorter videos and shorter attention span. In that, that was the whole thing. Like for Twitter, right? Twitter was only 140 characters. So then a lot of companies started to hire people with a comedy background because they had a very short message to get across. And so it had to be funny or had to be catchy. And advertising really took a leap for things like Twitter because it had to be short and catchy, and we got to hit it. And then now with the Vine progressed into TikTok, and it's these short videos. And so there's got to be a hook, and it has to have that appeal, and it has a very short frame to do it. YouTube is still maintaining in popularity, but when you look at YouTube metrics, lots of YouTube videos get clicks and not a lot of YouTube videos get watched through. And the percent of the actual content that's being watched is usually quite low. And so I'm sure it happened in a lot of industries, but it seems like in herpetoculture, like that's how those things started to happen, right? Is it had to be more and more and more each time. Like you couldn't you couldn't just be holding a pretty rainbow boa or something. That wasn't enough. I only have 30 seconds. Well, if I only have 30 seconds, I might as well hold a sunset monocle cobra because that's my most bang for that 30 seconds. And then, so the next person is like, oh, well, somebody already did a sunset monocle. Like, I guess I got to put a Mangshan on my face or whatever. Like you just had a progression of stupid things.
Escalated.
Because they felt those people are working off of advertising dollars and social media revenue. And there's pressure there, right? It's got to be the next coolest thing. When you
it's a race for the bottom.
For sure.
But there are people that can handle well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And they know what they're doing and they know the risks. And that, I think, is completely different.
TikTok and Instagram. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
A lot
So-
of really skilled and impressive people. If you don't already know who they are, you probably wouldn't know who they were.
Are you asking Ty to start a TikTok?
No, but
Music,
I do think
chillin',
that that's funny.
hooks.
You know, is a lot of the.
Everybody would follow your TikTok.
But I'm in.
So we did a video on safe manipulation of a venomous snake, right? How to pull a venomous snake out of an enclosure and put it back in, right? So we've got a YouTube channel. It's got nobody on it effectively because we don't promote it. We don't, and I don't particularly want to either. You know, it's not something that's, you know, it's something that we're really pushing for. We've got enough shit to do as it is. But the handling of venomous snakes in a reasonably professional manner is a boring activity because the snake gets hooked out, it goes into a container, you put the lid on the container, you clean the enclosure out, you take the snake out of the container and put it back into the other container and you shut the door.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not something to play with. It's not a toy. It's a snake, and this is what you do. This is how to do it. You get from A to B, and then from B back to A. And you want the animal to remain as calm as possible. And the best way to do that is to remove the animal cautiously and quickly and put it back cautiously and quickly. That's not rushing. That's just doing it. You end up doing it fairly quickly because the animal knows what's going on and you know what's going on. And the animal goes in and out.
The amount of crack you show when bending over could be a whole new revenue, though.
Well, there you go.
That would be
go.
So-
OnlyFans.
So I look at these new videos that you see out there, and these new videos you see out there are no different to the carnival.
Sure.
You go down the slideshow, and they're just a carnival. It's a whole heap of people that are trying to get your dollars to come over to their booth. All right. The difference is that their dollars that they get are from the advertising that they monetize on their channel. Right.
Right.
So they need to do something to get you over to their booth. And so what do? They do some of the craziest, most ludicrous shit out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people themselves can be really nice people, but they're doing something that I suppose is, you know, it's not necessarily that bad, probably if they weren't doing it in front of other people. But at the end of the day, they do it in front of other people, and they're the choices that they make. But you know what? We've all got opinions. We've all got ways of doing things, and that happens to be theirs.
We just earned ourselves a whole heap of new haters.
It's not, no, even on our end,
We're on the same boat.
we don't do venomous, of course, but like when people talk to us about doing shows or having these animals, and Teresa has, you know, a lot of tegus and monitors and very large things, and then I just tell people, like, we basically just lift a lot of weights, but the weights move. Like it's not. I mean,
Like
it's
juggling
cool.
a
It's fun, and I
15-year-old
enjoy
toddler.
it. But like moving a Burmese python in and out of its enclosure is not like, it's not a glamorous thing. It's the two of us carrying a 100-pound sack. It's not.
Well,
I
and
mean,
even
it's
we've finally, I think, gotten it across to a lot of people. They're like, "Oh, you should do feeding videos," and I was like, "Why?" Because people want to see a snake crawl up to a dead rat and put their mouth around it.
yeah.
like,
we try to.
We don't.
Yeah.
We
Actually,
have
work to
very
make that scene
little
boring.
items, and for
Yeah.
we'd have people be like, "Well, can we come in and watch you feed?" It's really messy, and it's a lot of like our Argus monitor flinging blood across the room. Like it's not.
But it's the like factor on Facebook. That's what they're asking for.
Right.
That's all they care about. They don't actually care about the process or anything like that. It's like contacting us. I want a venomous snake. What do you want? You're a cowboy. You want to put it up on Facebook for likes. You don't actually have a species that you want to keep. You want likes on Facebook.
Right.
And I suppose the other thing is too is that we're not anti-free handling or anything like that either. And this is something that people are like, what do you mean you're not anti-free handling? We're not anti-free handling. People are right to do what they want to do in their own place, as long as it doesn't affect somebody else. More power to you. You do what you do. You.
We
Right.
free handle at home. We just don't put it all over social media.
I was going to say, the moment you put it on social media, though, is the moment that it begins to not affect other people because
But yeah, historically, we used to free handle, so to speak, and free handling is the perception of what free handling is in the US and free handling is in Australia is two completely different things. Tailing a lappet over here, for instance, is holding a snake by the in front of the vent. You're not actually touching the tail at all. And you're not using a hook to support the body, but that does not mean that you're allowing the snake to come up and bite you. You're keeping the animal off balance so the animal can't swing up and bite. That is perceived as a form of free handling in certain cultures.
Sure.
Right? Certain people go, oh, that's free handling. No, it's not free handling here. All right? We don't use tongs. We do not use tongs for snake management at all here.
For the most part.
Right? We use tongs for picking up rats and using the tongs, putting it in with the snake, with the holding a rat to support the rat.
Australian view on tongs is completely different to an American view on tongs.
So people in Africa use tongs for capturing and manipulation of snakes. They use them for capturing and manipulation of rattlesnakes. No one uses tongs in Australia for the most part at all for
you find a
the management of
person that
snakes.
Does, but yeah.
And the people that tend to use tongs over here tend to be people that have immigrated from either Europe or America or Africa or something like that. So it's a whole different style of
keeping husbandry, handling
and manipulation of animals. So,
well, I mean, it's the same thing as people play the videos kind of in a funny way, but like you see a lot of folks in India, and it's usually older people, and just in their culture and their setup, it's typically older women, and they're literally removing they're moving cobras or what have you. And people always do the funny, like, that grandma got mad at a cobra or whatever. And it's like, well, no, where they're from, like, you just get it and get it out and get rid of it, because they live there with them, and it's not even looked at in the same way, and it probably, well, I guess it's relative, but like that woman probably knows more about cobra behavior than a lot of people, because you hang out every day and you live in a place that is populated by these things, which are on paper very, very dangerous, but they know what they're doing. They would never know how to use a snake hook, but I bet you they pick up a cobra better than I can. And then you see it.
It's the same thing with people who work with horses.
People lose their minds,
What?
Sorry.
It's the same with people working with horses. Horses scare the absolute bejeebus out of you. No way I'd walk up to a bloody horse the way people walk in with horses, and they break them and they do what they do and all the rest of it. Horses are big, scary animals. And on paper, they kill a hell of a lot more people in outside of places that don't have effective snake bite antivenom and all the rest of it. Yeah. But horses kill people, and yet we have no problem in putting our 3-year-old on the back of a horse.
Right.
That's socially acceptable. That's normal. That's fine.
But it's got a horn on its head that's fake, so we call it a unicorn, not a horse.
And they're pretty.
And we give it a really pretty name like Sapphire.
But it's the same thing, isn't it? You look at the way you teach your kids, or I mean, our kids are grown up now, but you teach the kids about dogs. And no, just because your dog is friendly at home doesn't mean to say that the dog out over there is friendly, right? So you won't just go and pat him. You make sure that you talk to the owner of the dog first. Oh, is it okay? Da 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 da. All right, and it's a learned behavior. So there's no different to working with venomous snakes and things like that as well. In that, some things that can appear to be dangerous to people that don't understand what you're actually doing, and then at the same time, there's also things that can be very dangerous that people don't realize how dangerous it actually is because they don't understand what they're going on with.
For sure. So we are at 2.5 hours. So
he talks. so much.
Sorry.
It's all right. That's why I wanted
would
you guys to come on.
say that it's probably a little bit of all of us at this point.
So I do want to try and wrap up, but before we wrap up, I do want you guys to tell folks about the book, when it would be available to all of us that need crazy mailing, and how the process for that would be. And for those folks who are not live right now, they're going to listen to this on the podcast.
There's a book held in
A
front
book
of the camera.
copy won't say field guide by, I promise.
Well, no, I made the thumbnail for the episode is the picture that Scott sent me, so you can see what the cover looks like, and then I will link you guys' Facebook and website in the description and stuff, so people can come find you if they're listening to this after the fact. But
That'd be awesome.
So all sales go through the website.
Yeah. Otherwise, I forget stuff when people message it to me. So it's go through the website. It's the easiest.
I do believe it landed on the shores and has cleared customs. So I'm just awaiting the order from the supplier. And hopefully that will be here midweek.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll be sending out books by the end of the week, which will be really exciting. You guys get to hear that first. So, so if people order through the website, we're happy to sign the books and stuff like that.
Can I just say though, so that's the front page. There isn't that much that way. There isn't that much room. Sometimes we get requested basically short stories. There's not that much room.
Okay.
But look, so there's sort of in the series, there's 3 books that really sort of jump out towards people. So there's a frog book, a lizard book, and a snake book.
There's a dangerous creatures book as well.
There's a dangerous creatures as well, but that may not be everyone's cup of tea. $25 Australian each. The postage across to the US is quite expensive. So
basically, if you've got a couple of people that want to buy, it's not quite as bad on hit your mates up. It's not quite as bad on postage because it goes by obviously size of the parcel sort of thing. So
okay.
Yeah, so happy to do it. But yeah,
very cool. And not me, but if you could send Teresa a link for the Facebook group, I will also I'll link
that'd be great.
When I post the episode to the Facebook page, I will put a comment below and we'll link the Facebook group in the comment section for the Facebook.
Thanks, guys,
for the episode. So is that the easiest way to reach you guys? Go through Nature for You on Facebook and the website, and then
either that or shoot us a message. Shoot me a message. Shoot Ty a message.
But before you do that, Google your time zone in relation to where they live, and then
if you're not going to Google a time zone, send a message to me.
There you go.
Or just
it's all good. And you know what?
Response.
Sorry, what's that?
Or just don't expect a prompt response.
No, because I do that. I send messages and I'm like, oh, they'll get back to me, and then he answers like right then, and it's like, oh, I didn't know we were talking right now. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you send messages to him,
I'm one of those
answer.
People that needs to Google.
It sounds like she doesn't.
I don't usually get messages. I get photos that weren't really asked for.
Oh. For real? Still?
100%. 100%.
I say testicles aren't as attractive as boys seem to think they are. But anyway.
No.
I cannot believe that still happens.
Apparently.
It's like a standing joke in society to not do that. Why would you still do that? That bothers me.
I don't know.
Anyway.
And on that note,
that should be
on
the
the
ending
Mr.
note.
Vane conversation.
Yes, that should be the ending note of the episode. If you take nothing from this episode, take not
Nobody
to do
wants to see
stupid
your
things
Mr.
with
Vane.
venomous on TikTok and stop sending those type of pictures unwarranted to people. It blows my mind that still is a thing. So
yeah, I do wonder why they do it at times. Is that it's like, and then they sometimes they have the gall to then ask me a question after the fact. I'm like, really? Really?
Mary, you don't talk.
You think I don't know?
That's a different level there. That takes some courage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Courage or stupidity, I'm not quite sure,
50-50.
Yeah.
I really hope you get a dick pic now after that.
Yeah. Anyway, such is life.
All right.
Fantastic, guys. Thanks so much for having us on.
Yeah,
it's been
thanks
great.
for coming on. Thanks for both of you coming on, since I guess that
you
is
break my
a
cherry.
rare thing.
No. I've done one before. But thank you for having us. Yeah. It's been lovely.
If anyone does want to reach out and wants any questions answered or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer people's questions and more than happy to engage with people. So feel free to reach out and let us know and take it from there.
And for folks who are interested in potentially doing a book buy, if you are local to us, I am going to try to set something up. And then I might also talk to Madison Herp folks. So if you are people in those social groups, message me on Facebook and we will try to set something up.
Cool. Sounds great.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, guys. It's been great.
Lovely to meet you both.
You too.
See ya.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
All right. So that was episode 17. Two couples apparently finding their Australian or American counterparts. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Later.